Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night wherever you are around the world. Thanks for making us part of your Pro Tour Sunday here from Honolulu. Pro Tour Kaladesh is gearing up for the top 8. Rich Hagan sitting alongside the Pro Tour historian Brian David Marshall, and from inside R&D at Wizards of the Coast, Mr. Ian Duke. Guys, we've had 2 fantastic days. BDM, set up the scene for us. What are you hoping for out of this 3rd and final day here on this island paradise?
I mean, the same thing I'm always hoping to see. Great players playing great Magic, getting to see as many cards from Kaladesh, parade through our feature match area as possible.
Ian, how's the weekend been from an R&D perspective?
You know, it's been fantastic. We've really seen Kaladesh in full form, both in limited and constructed. We've seen crazy, wild combo decks. We've seen aggro. We've seen control decks. Really the whole spectrum that there is to experience in Magic, and it's just been absolutely wonderful to watch.
And I have to say, one of the best things about this particular Pro Tour is while we've had 2 great days, those decks and that deck diversity have really survived through to Sunday. We've got so many wonders to show you in deck design as we head through our Pro Tour Sunday. Now, we've been telling you this all weekend, but maybe some of you are joining us for the first time. We have a new shape to our top 8 bracket. So why don't we take a look at that for you and walk you through exactly how today is going to work, because it is a little bit different. We're going to begin in just a few minutes time with stage 1 of the quarterfinals. That's going to see your number 5 seed, Carlos Romao, Brazil, with Jeskai Control, against Joey Manor of the United States, the 8 seed, with White Blue Flash. In the bottom half of the bracket, Ben Hull, the 33-year-old Canadian with his red-white vehicles deck, will be up against Li Shiqian, the 7 seed from Hong Kong, with Mardu vehicles, and he's playing in his 5th Pro Tour top 8. Now, the reason they're playing in stage 1 is because they are the 5 through 8 seeds. Waiting for them in the wings are the 3 and 4 seed. That's Matt Nass with Team at Etherworks in the top half of the bracket, and Pierre Dajon, the 3 seed, with blue-red spells in the bottom half. That is their reward for playing through the Swiss and getting to the number 3 and 4 seed. They don't have to play until the 2nd stage of the quarterfinals. And then this afternoon, after lunch, the winners of Romao, Manor, Nass, one of those will advance to the semi-finals to play the number 1 seed. That's Makis Matsoukas of Greece, playing in his very first Pro Tour with red-white tokens. And in the bottom half of the bracket, Li Shiqian, Ben Hull, or Pierre Dajon, one of those will face the Hall of Fame master from Japan, Shota Yasuoka, with Grixis Control. For Matsoukas and Yasuoka, their reward for being the top 2 players in the Swiss yesterday and through Friday as well mean they don't have to play until the semi-finals. So Romao, Manor, Hull and Li Shiqian need 4 wins today. Nass and Dajon need 3. The top 2 seeds, Makis Matsoukas and Shota Yasuoka, begin Sunday just 2 matches away from a slice of Magic immortality. So that's the shape of our day. We're going to run the 2 stages of the quarterfinals. You'll see 5v8, 6v7. They'll run simultaneously and we'll bounce between the 2 matches. You'll see all the key games, all the key action. Same again for stage 2. And then once we reach semi-finals, it'll just be down to 1 table in the heart of our feature match area, and you'll see every turn of every game. So let's get to it. Our first quarterfinal in stage 1 is Carlos Romao against Joey Manor. Let's take a look at Carlos Romao's profile for you. He's from Brazil. Team is Dex Army. They've got fantastic shirts this time around. 34 years old, and he was only 20 when he won the 2002 World Championship. Over 100,000 lifetime earnings, 9 Grand Prix top 8s. Most of those seem to have come in the last 6 weeks because he's a Pro Tour team champion in the last 6 weeks at Sao Paulo, and then again he is the winner of Grand Prix Atlanta just a week ago. Let's take a look at his deck for you. He is playing Jeskai Control. It's all there on your screen. Ian, what's going on with Jeskai Control?
In many ways, this is a very classic control deck, chock full of creature removal spells, ways to get card advantage, and then a few heavy-hitting finishers. The big additions to this deck that really make it stand out to me from Kaladesh are Torrential Gearhulk, alongside Glimmer of Genius and Harnessed Lightning. So this kind of energy package plus Torrential Gearhulk package really comes from Kaladesh and enables control decks like this to really break out in the metagame.
So for people who have played Control over the years, is it going to play out like a fairly typical control deck?
I think so. You're just trying to defend yourself early on, trade 1-for-1 removal spells with your opponent's creatures, try to stick something like a planeswalker like Dovin Baan, or just stabilize the board enough that you can start landing Gear Hulks, flashing back instants from your graveyard, and just getting more and more advantage, spiraling that into a win.
The instant you're most likely to see Carlos Romao flashing back with Torrential Gear Hulk is going to be Glimmer of Genius. It's really like an instant speed 5/6 Mull Drifter.
Well,
Sounds like great value.
yeah, it was like, ding, thank you very much. That sounds awesome. Okay, so that is Carlos Romao. He is going to be playing against Joey Manor of the United States. Let's take a look at him. He is 21 years old. He has 27 lifetime pro points. This is his first Pro Tour top 8. And BDM, I know you can speak a little bit about him. We'll do that in just a moment because I know you know his that only game in town. He's a store owner somewhere near you, I think. So we'll find out more about that in a moment. But let's take a look at his deck for you. He is going to be playing this concoction of 75 cards. He is white, blue, flash. So what has he brought to battle, BDM?
Well, you know what? This is we've called this a spirit stack. We've called it a flash deck. I mean, it's playing cards and threats at the end of your opponent's turn, disrupting their plan. Ian and I were just talking about how Selfless Spirit has been really this overperformer out of Eldritch Moon. Really, we're seeing it in multiple archetypes, not just in these blue-white flash decks, but this is really where it shined. Spell Queller, a great card coming into this tournament in a room full of forecasting cost. Aetherworks Marvels and stuff like that. But this is a deck that could really give Carlos Romao fits.
Right, Ian, do you see this as being favored towards Joey Manor with the white-blue flash over the Jeskai Control?
I definitely do. As BDM mentioned, Selfless Spirit is a really key card. Rattle Chains as well can answer 1-for-1 removal. So he's sort of got sweepers covered in a way. He's got 1-for-1 removal covered in a way. And just the ability to operate at instant speed against a control deck is such a great way for a more aggressive deck to fight.
Archangel Avacyn, lest we forget.
Yeah,
also a pretty powerful
Wasn't
card.
she really quite good? And apparently still is. Yeah, all right. So that's one of our quarterfinals here in stage 1. But we're going to begin our coverage with the first game. We're going to get off to the races with Ben Hull against Li Shi-Chan. They're both playing vehicles decks. Let's take a look at Ben Hull for you. He's a 33-year-old Canadian, and this is his first 34-year-old. No lifetime pro points until this weekend when that number rattles up a lot. First Pro Tour top 8, no Grand Prix top 8s, and you see him in the meh t-shirt. Well, he kind of feels like that, you know? He's saying, yeah, I'm in the top 8, it's great, don't have a big team around me, just here I am, getting ready to play some Magic.
His tournament actually started off very, very inauspiciously. He was worried that he was going to be violently ill during the draft. He, went out for food on Thursday night, woke up Friday morning and was in terrible shape, and literally talked to head judge Toby Elliott and said, what happens if I have to leave the table during the draft? And he's like, well, the judge will randomly pick a card for you when it comes time to pick a card. It'd be like if you timed out of, if you lost your connection on Magic Online, which is something he has experience with. He's a Magic Online player, mostly a limited player. He managed to stay at the table, and obviously a good thing that he did, because here he is now in the top 8.
Well, let's take a look at his deck for you. It's red, white vehicles. Here it is. What's the shape of this, BDM?
Well, you know what? Again, Ben is really mostly a limited player. He doesn't fancy himself a constructed player. Got here through the RPTQ system, playing limited, and he said, I'm not really a standard guy. I don't know this. So he went with one of the known decks of the format, and really his play testing consisted of queuing up Chris Van Meter standard videos. And, so he's playing the red-white vehicles deck. You see Depala, PNLR, the Selfless Spirit that we just talked about, and then some aggressive creatures like Toolcraft Exemplar, and then, topping out with the Sky Scoverin or the Fleet Whale Cruiser and things like that.
Okay, so that's Ben Hull from Canada. He is up against one of the most experienced players in the top 8. It is Li Shi-Chan, and here you see him from MTG Mint Card, the Hong Kong player, closing in on 300 lifetime pro points. He could pass 300 here today, over $100,000 lifetime earnings. This is his 5th Pro Tour top 8. And in the weekend, BDM, where we had the Hall of Fame ceremony, 5 is a really important number.
Yeah, I mean, 5 is bigger, more top 8s than a lot of people who get into the Hall of Fame in recent years, Li Tian doesn't even enter into the discussion, currently, not scheduled to be on the ballot next year because his Pro Tour debut came in 2009.
Right, so we're still a way off. So by the time
he's in his 8th season on the Pro Tour right now.
Right, in many ways that makes his accomplishment of 5 Pro Tour top 8s even that much more enormous.
Right, I was trying to remember when it was, and it's only 2012, his first return to Ravnica. So he's got 5 Pro Tour top 8s in 4.5 seasons, which is crazy. I mean, it does put him in the absolute elite of the modern game for sure. Now, what deck is he playing? Well, he is playing Mardu Vehicles. So it's a Vehicles deck again, Ian, but Mardu, that gives us a clue that he's gone a little wider than just red-white.
That's right. Well, the previous deck that we saw was the very classic red-white Vehicles deck. This is the more metagamed Vehicles deck. We're calling it Mardu Vehicles. It's splashing black, but it's also splashing blue for some sideboard cards, which we won't get into quite yet. But basically, this is adding the additional power of unlicensed disintegration, as well as getting some sideboard cards. And the way you do that is through Cultivator's Caravan as an additional vehicle that can also fix your mana.
You also get a little extra synergy from black with Scrap Heat Scrounger, right?
Absolutely true, and that's a card, again, we talked about cards that are effective against sweepers like Selfless Spirit. This adds to that package where, you recover after a Fumigate or Radiant Flames or something like that by just bringing it back from your graveyard.
So Romao against Mana, we feel, is a relatively clean matchup in the sense that they're doing very different things. This is going to be a little more jostling for position. They are both playing vehicles. Ian, do you have a sense of how this one might go?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. When you get 2 very aggressive decks like this matched up against one another that are, have a very similar game plan or just trying to attack each other, these decks are highlighted by their ability to play cheap threats and trade off very easily, 1-for-1 removal for threats. So the matchup can actually turn out to be more grindy than you would expect, and we might see this match going a little bit longer than, say, an aggressive deck against a controlling deck.
Well, Ben Hull kind of likes where he is in terms of a matchup in deck, doesn't like his matchup as a human being. He thinks Li Tian's really, really good at Magic. He's not wrong.
I was going to say, he's quite correct.
All right, so it is time to start your engines, and it is time for stage 1 of the quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Kaladesh.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to coverage of the finals. Well, not the finals, the final day here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. I'm Gabby Spartz here, joined today by Luis Scott Vargas, and our players are shuffling. They're still getting ready. We have an interesting matchup, Luis. Do you have any idea how you think it's going to go? Do you have any players for favorites?
So we're actually starting on 2 kind of pseudo mirrors. We've got the red-white vehicles mirror with Ben Hull versus Li Tian, and then we have Carlos Romao playing Jeskai Control against Joey Manor playing a blue-white Flash Spirits deck that can also play quite controlling. So it'll be interesting to see these 2 fast decks and 2 controlling decks kind of run into each other and see where they end up.
Yeah, so let's head down to the action. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to coverage of Pro Tour Kaladesh. It's time for the first stage of the quarterfinals. Over on the left, you're going to see Ben Hull from Canada. He will be literally piloting red-white vehicles today, versus Li Tian from Hong Kong, playing Mardu Vehicles. And as you said, Luis, this is going to be sort of a mirror match, right?
Yeah, both players, like the vast majority of their decks actually just overlap. The key differences here are Ben Hull has a slightly higher curve. He's got cards like PNLR and Sky Sovereign Console Flagship, whereas Li Tian is playing Scrap Heap Scrounger with like a tiny black splash that puts the Mardu in Mardu Vehicles to make his deck a little bit more low to the ground and pressure the combo and control decks that he may have expected.
What does that mean for the kind of roles that the players want to take in this matchup?
I would expect Ben to be a little bit more on the control side just because his deck is more suited to play the long game. And like Ian said in the lead up to this match, when both players have a bunch of really cheap cards and really cheap threats, they often actually trade off, and you end up playing a longer game than you might expect from 2 decks that are typically fast decks.
So we see both players are off to a relatively quick start. Selfless Spirit over there for Ben, and Thraben Inspector for Lee. A Smuggler's Copter is the follow-up.
This is really interesting. You almost would never see Theriban Inspector not bash into Selfless Spirit, but because of that Smuggler's Copter and Tian wanting to crew it, he's actually going to leave the Inspector back with that clue hiding behind the Inspector.
Interestingly enough, you got a chance to catch up with Ben before the quarterfinals, correct?
I did, and as they said in the preview, he likes the deck matchup. He thinks his deck is a little bit favored against Lee's, but he will defer to Lee's greater experience and the fact that Ben actually didn't play much Standard before this tournament. He says he's primarily a limited player.
Yeah, not just that. He said he didn't have that much time. He did prep a lot for Limited, didn't have that much time for Constructed, and as BDM mentioned earlier, he was feeling pretty ill coming into the tournament, so he didn't really get a chance to play too much Standard, and now here he is playing his Standard deck in the quarterfinals of the Pro Tour.
Yeah, I mean, when your lifetime earnings go from $250 to more than $10,000, you've had a pretty good weekend.
It looks like the Smuggler's Copters is going to be getting in there, piloted by that Thraben Inspector. Just another Selfless Spirit and a Thraben Inspector for Ben Hull as well.
Ben has the option of potentially double blocking Smuggler's Copter with Selfless Spirits. It's not an advantageous trade, but unlike most double blocks, it doesn't end up as badly against removal because if Lee played a Harness Lightning, one Spirit could save the other and it wouldn't die in combat. That being said, I'm not surprised that Ben opted not to make that trade.
What do you think are some of the key cards that we can expect to see in this matchup?
Well, Smuggler's Copter is a big one. It's just such a powerful card that the fact that Lee's the one who's using it and Ben is on mostly Selfless Spirits is great for Lee. The other heavy hitters are the 4 and 5 mana cards. Gideon, Ally of Zendikar on both sides, and then Sky Sovereign on Ben Hull's side, and then Depala Pilot Exemplar that both players have access to. So these are the kind of cards that give you an advantage over the course of the game.
Cultivator's Caravan is a follow-up for Lee, and it's a little unfortunate for him since he has so many one-drops in this deck, but he couldn't actually put that mana to good use this turn.
Yeah, one of the really cool features of Tian's deck is that he's got Cultivator's Caravan, which taps for any color as soon as you play it, and 12 one-drops in the main deck and 10 one-drops on the sideboard. He really wants to maximize his chances of going Caravan into one-drop on turn 3.
PNLR coming down for Ben Hulk, providing another Thopter and another Thraben Inspector.
Pia is a card that Lee does not have access to, and PNLR is very powerful. We've seen her play a crucial role, over the course of this weekend. And in this kind of mirror match, the fact that she provides a flying blocker, relevant combat abilities on both of her activated abilities, she is going to be very important here.
Looks like Lee does have access to 4 mana this turn if he wants to play that Gideon Ally of Zendikar. Do you think that'll be a crucial card in this matchup potentially?
Gideon is at its best when both players have either a lot of cards in play or both players have no cards in play. When you have a board like this where Lee only has one creature in play. He's got 2 vehicles and he can't crew one of them, and he actually could crew both. He could crew the Copter with the Inspector and then use the Copter to crew the Cultivator's Caravan. But that doesn't give him a lot of protection for Gideon. He's kind of outnumbered here. I mean, Ben has 6 creatures in play, so Gideon, despite being a very powerful card, is not one that's going to survive for very long if Ben wants to get aggressive.
So Ether Hub coming down for Lee, and he's still deciding what he wants to do this turn. Available to him are a Smuggler's Copter, a Depala, and that Gideon, as we mentioned. Looks like Depala is going to be making an appearance.
And that play makes sense because he can play multiple cards since he has 5 mana thanks to the Cultivator's Caravan, being able to play multiple cards this turn and then set up next turn to potentially protect a Gideon.
That's going to do it for Lee's turn. He's going to pass back to Ben. Let's see what he can string together here. And he does have those clues sitting over on the left, which will provide him some card advantage moving into the later part of this game. Currently only a Declaration and Stone in hand. Let's see what he drew for the turn. It's a Smuggler's Copter.
All right, so Ben also has access to a flyer now, or a large enough flyer to battle with Lee's flyers. So if Ben were to attack, Lee could crew both the Smuggler's Copters, and they'd be 4/4s because of Depala. That doesn't leave a very enticing attack for Ben, even though Selfless Spirit can make it so at most he loses 1 creature. What Ben can do, though, is if he does attack with everything and Lee animates both Copters, Ben has the opportunity to Declaration in Stone and take down both Smuggler's Copters. Also, notice that both players just don't have a ton of time to crack all these clues. Neither of them has done any investigating into what those clues may hold because they've just tapped out every single turn.
All right, so it looks like the Declaration in Stone is actually going to target that Depala.
presumably exiled. And she could
it looks
have her on the way out.
Yeah, I was going to say she definitely animated that Thopter on the way out. So at least one of them is active.
So now Lee has a 3/3 Smuggler's Copter active and can activate or crew the second with a Thraben Inspector. Ben, again, does have Selfless Spirit, so any all-out attack could result in just a Selfless Spirit dying, but it looks like he declined to do so.
Oh, and actually, before I forget, we should mention that Lee actually mulliganed to 6 this game.
Okay, so the Smuggler's Copter, despite being a great card filtering mechanism, when you're just down total cards, it is less effective to use the ability. Lee drawing another Plains here. So he's sitting on a Gideon. Another interesting play with Gideon is to just immediately emblem. The problem with that in this situation is that, thanks to that Declaration in Stone, Lee only has one creature capable of crewing vehicles. He's just the one Thraben Inspector. So he might be in a position where, even though Gideon might end up getting taken out by Ben's attackers, Lee may need to make a Knight token to start crewing those Smuggler's Copters. Lee also, because he has the Cultivator's Caravan that isn't likely to be crewed yet, he might want to crack a clue just to see what his options are before committing to playing Gideon.
Yeah, he still has a couple mana left. And that's exactly what he's going to do. There goes the first clue. Let's take a look what's inside it. It looks like a Harness Lightning, I think.
Yeah, so Harness Lightning is going to give Lee the option to take down, well, anything Ben has, but really not because of those Selfless Spirits. So basically, it'll kill any Selfless Spirit he wants. So if Gideon were to make a Knight,
It looks like it's going to make an appearance.
then the 2 Smuggler's Copters would get crewed, could block two of the creatures in play.
All right, so Gideon, the ally is on the card coming down, and it looks like a Knight token is also entering the battlefield here. Lee is going to pass the turn back to Ben. Ben with no cards in hand and now has drawn just
Looks
a
like
mountain.
a mountain. And here's where the clues actually do start becoming very relevant. We saw Lee crack one last turn. He's probably going to crack one next turn. Ben has a pretty good chance of starting to crack clues. And this is kind of why this matchup goes a little bit longer is, you know, a normal aggressive deck, after it plays out all its 1 and 2 mana cards, ends up with no cards in hand. These decks just end up with multiple clues in play thanks to Thraben Inspectors and Declaration in Stone. And all of a sudden, they just get to draw 2 to 3 more cards over the course of the game, have access to more spells, and just have more interaction happen.
Can you speak some to that, actually? Ian was mentioning it at the desk this morning, but, you know, typically you expect a vehicles matchup like this to be just vroom vroom and very aggressive, but we're actually seeing a bit of a grindy matchup here.
It's because both players have so many cards they can just play the board, and because a lot of these cards do lend themselves to defense and offense at the same time. Like Selfless Spirit's an efficient, 2 mana flying attacker. On the other hand, when both players have 6 creatures in play, it just means getting into large combats against Selfless Spirit does not work out well. On the other hand, it can't attack past Smuggler's Copter, so we have this standoff here as neither player is, has made any relevant attacks in the last couple turns. It's easy for things to shift very quickly because players have removal, they have, very heavily board impacting cards, but we're going to see more passing back and forth than you might expect from 2 decks, which normally do a lot of attacking. Like we saw these decks in the Swiss where all of a sudden, they're ending the game by turn 4 or 5. Here we have life totals at 17 to 15 with Ben on 7 creatures in play and Tian on essentially 4, even though only 2 at once because those copters can't be active at the same time as all the other creatures are untapped.
All right, so it looks like the flyers are coming in. Smuggler's Copter triggers there.
Oh, and wow, that is Sky Sovereign console flagship. Unfortunately for Ben, he does have to discard that land, so he can't play it yet. But Sky Sovereign is exactly the card Ben wants to break open this board stall. I mean, take a look at that thing. It's gigantic. It can pick off creatures, and as I learned as we were preparing for the Pro Tour, it can also pick off planeswalkers.
That did come up. It was very relevant, actually.
Yes, an underutilized part of the card is it actually can take pot shots at Gideon, which hardly seems fair given how big that thing is and how Gideon is actually just a normal-sized human being.
The other nice thing is that in combination with the Selfless Spirits, it's not just a matter of Lisha Chan actually having enough blockers to potentially take it down. This thing just gets to keep bashing.
Exactly. Those 2 Smuggler's Copters, you would think they can eat dodge the Sky Sovereign trigger because you can't actually shoot them until they become active.
Yep.
They could double block. They can just try to swarm the Sky Sovereign with those little Thopters, but the Selfless Spirit, as you said, would protect Sky Sovereign.
So it looks like the upcoming turns might be very impactful here for Ben. Still deciding how he wants to navigate this turn.
And it looks like the Smuggler's Copters are going to battle, but Ben, like you said, it's on Ben to decide whether he wants to use those Selfless Spirits because Selfless Spirit's really valuable here, and using them, you don't want to use them lightly. Take a look at what Tian is deciding between his Harnessed Lightning that he already had and Inventor's Apprentice, which he, no longer is as relevant as it could be.
All right, so Gideon will be taking some damage there. Going down to 1, still alive though.
And Pia Nalar, again, showing her value here, making it so the Thopter token did 3 damage to Gideon. Selfless Spirit did save the Smuggler's Copter in that battle, but that does open the door for Tian to Harness Lightning the remaining Selfless Spirit, which means that next turn combat won't go as smoothly for Ben.
All right, let's see what Lee found off the top here. It's a Veteran Motorist.
And once again, the scry on this card just means that these aggressive decks with low curves just have access to a much better land spell ratio than you might expect. I mean, I've played these mono red decks with 22 lands that sometimes just draw 7 lands and are just out of luck, whereas these decks, they get to discard them Smuggler's Copter, they get to draw extra cards with clues, they get to scry with Veteran Motorist, and it just means that we're going to see tons of action here.
Yeah, we actually just saw Lee ship both the cards to the bottom, so continuing to dig through his deck and actually find the impactful cards in the matchup.
And it looks like Lee might be lining up some attackers here. Veteran Motorist is a very good pilot for Cultivator's Caravan, which would then be a 6/6. And Ben has left himself with just a 2/2, a 1/2, and a 2/1 as blockers. So, I mean, even Gideon could +1. Like, we could see some pretty big attacks here.
There we see Cultivator's Caravan over on the right from Kaladesh. Sweet addition. It doubles up, both being a great vehicle that can be crewed, with Veteran Motorist, becomes a 6/6, but also able to play so many of the 1-drops that Lee has in his deck.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the big innovations that Lee had. We haven't seen very many Cultivator's Caravans outside of, like, the Metalwork Colossus deck, but Lee not only takes advantage of the fact that it provides any color, since he's got 4 colors worth of spells over the course of his main deck and sideboard, but it also, as you said, just taps for 1 mana immediately to play a 1-drop. So it's such an efficient turn if you play a 3-drop on a 1-drop on turn 3. Because a lot of decks, like the Metalwork Colossus deck, will play a turn 3 Cultivator's Caravan and basically can't use that 1 mana. So they're losing that mana.
Looks like this Gideon wants to battle, taking up to 2, becoming a creature. All right, the Motorist is going to be crewing that Caravan, turning it into a 6/6. So both the 6/6 and the Gideon getting into the red zone.
And so if Ben wants to lose his Selfless Spirit, he gets basically free blocks. He can just go block, sack Selfless Spirit. He can also chump one of those creatures and take a bunch of damage.
It looks like that's what he's opting to do. He's blocking the slightly bigger creature in Cultivator's Caravan, so he will be taking 5.
So Ben really wants to draw a land here. If he can draw his 5th land and play Sky Sovereign, he can take out Gideon right away. And then once he does that, he's able to, or he could take out any of Ben's creatures that isn't a vehicle. And once Ben does that, once he has a Sky Sovereign in play, he definitely has an advantage going forward, and then doesn't have to be as aggressive and can kind of sit back and maybe try to make sure he doesn't die to Tian's attacks.
Yeah, it definitely felt like Lee is getting into the driver's seat here in this game, but Ben did find a mountain off the top.
So another thing Ben can do here is that he has that Sky Sovereign. He knows that. Lee doesn't know that. So Ben can make an attack threatening Gideon here and potentially entice Lee into blocks that are favorable for Ben in order to protect Gideon, and then just afterwards play Sky Sovereign and again kill Gideon.
It looks like that is what he's going to do. Smuggler's Copter attacking. Finds a Harness Lightning off the top.
It's a great card, but land number 5 and Sky Sovereign is also a pretty good combo. So it has to be enticing to just play your 5-drop here. We'll see what
He
Ben
also
decides.
has all these clues that he hasn't cracked yet, so this will give him some breathing room there as well. He actually chooses to discard the mountain.
So it looks like Ben is on the plan of casting Harness Lightning this turn and then potentially cracking a clue.
All right, so it looks like Harness Lightning
And we can take
is
a
on
look
the
at
stack.
And we can take a look at Lee's hand. He also has a Harness Lightning. So despite the fact that Lee's Copter is going to die here, so, assuming Ben spends the 3 energy, which is, of course, Ben's option, Lee could also cast his own Harness Lightning, though that Selfless Spirit will save the Smuggler's Copter, and Gideon will presumably end up dying here.
Yeah, so that does happen. Harness Lightning takes down the Copter. Gideon is down.
And Ben, he has incentive to crack a clue now, because if he draws something like Needle Spires or Inspiring Vantage, he wants to play his land, which will come to play tapped. On the other hand, he does have incentive to wait in case he wanted to use Pia's ability in some manner, or leave up Harnessed Lightning. He doesn't have one, but Lee doesn't know that. Though given that Ben doesn't have an untapped artifact, Pia's ability is a little less relevant.
Moving the turn back to Lee, let's see. He still has that Gideon, another Gideon, actually. And the Harness Lightning as well.
And Lee opting not to use Harness Lightning yet. It's interesting because that Selfless Spirit is such a good counter to Harness Lightning that I can imagine Lee just wanting to wait until he can definitely take down a Smuggler's Copter, or end up in a combat where, let's say, Ben goes double block, sack Selfless Spirit, and then in response...
And then the response he uses the Harness Lightning?
Exactly. But the disadvantage of that is that now Lee has 5 lands and 6 mana worth of spells. He does have that Cultivator's Caravan, but it's getting to the point where actually it's starting to rumble as a 6/6 thanks to the Motorist.
Mm-hmm.
So if Lee wants to tap it for mana, then he misses out on one of his bigger creatures. Also, Lee's forces have been kind of chipped away here. Between the Harness Lightning and the Gideon getting attacked, Lee's ending up with like not as many creatures as he had before, and it's going to be a little harder for him to be aggressive here. And remember that Concealed Courtyard that Lee's concealing in his hand? It does enter the battlefield tapped. Because it's land number 6, not land number 3. So it doesn't provide the 6 mana that Lee would like this turn. Ben Hull shaking his head in apparent dismay, but this game actually looks like it's going fairly well for him here.
All right, so that Veteran Motorist getting into that Caravan, and it's bashing along with that Knight Ally. Ben is choosing to respond to this, cracking a clue. He's found another Selfless Spirit off the top, so even if one of these Selfless Spirits does manage to die, the next one maybe can protect the Sky Sovereign / the rest of the team and the Copters. Looks like Thraven Inspector jumping in front of that Caravan.
Throwing this Thraven Inspector under, well, I don't want to call it a bus because it's a Caravan, but it's close.
Under the Caravan is fine enough.
And there had to be some thought there for trading Pia Nalar for a Knight token as well, but Ben did decline to do that. Lee also presumably is interested in making more Knights with Gideon at some point here. If he were going to emblem, I would imagine he would have done so before combat. But thanks to that Harness Lightning, there's a chance Lee also just saves the Gideon for later, because if he plays Gideon, the 2 flying creatures, the Thopter and the Copter, plus the Selfless Spirit potentially can take down Gideon. So Planeswalkers tend not to match up all that well against evasive creatures, and we've kind of seen that this game already.
Lee thinking about it. Whether or not this Gideon is coming down, it seems like he will. Gideon allies on the card. Entering the battlefield, let's see what Lee wants to do. Most likely opting for another Knight. There he is. We're going to see a pass back to Ben.
Ben's still in a spot where he wouldn't mind a 5th land, but, Ben's in that magical place where if he draws a 5th land, he can play his awesome 5-drop,
Yep.
the Sky Sovereign.
And if he didn't, he just has awesome cards to play.
Exactly. Now he has his hand is Harness Lightning, Selfless Spirit. He's on 4 lands. He can cast 2 spells a turn every turn, and that's just putting Ben in a great spot here. Smuggler's Copter, undercover hero here, discarding 2 mountains earlier to make Ben's draws just that much better.
All right, so Ben has to decide at this point, especially with that Gideon being at 4, how he maybe wants to take it down. Sky Sovereign could be integral to that, but he does not have a 5th land to actually do that yet. So let's see. It looks like Smuggler's Copter is attacking. He's found a Veteran Motorist off the top.
And so now Ben, he's got access to tons of options here. discarding one of the 2-drops would make some sense because he's able to play the other 2-2-drops, and again, if he draws a 5th land, play Sky Sovereign. It's also somewhat interesting that if Lee ends up, being a little bit more aggressive next turn, Ben is only at 10, and Lee does have 4 creatures plus a Cultivator's Caravan in play.
Right, so it actually, the Selfless Spirit was getting in there as well, so that Gideon is down for this turn. There's a land that he could keep on top if he wants to play the Sky Sovereign soon. Scrying with that Veteran Motorist.
And a Fleet Wheel Cruiser, which, that's not looking quite as good as Sky Sovereign here just because Lee has so many ground creatures. Also, if Lee ends up ever leaving Cultivator's Caravan back, it is a 6/6 thanks to the Motorist. The Motorist looks like it's used to driving faster vehicles than the Cultivator's Caravan. that thing doesn't look like
He's
its
built
top
for
speed
speed.
is very high. Ben still has a clue as well. He's got options, though. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point that clue just gets sacrificed to PNLR to make something unable to block. That's just like another option that
It is a nice synergy that probably doesn't come out that often, but it is good to be aware of. It looks like 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom. And Ben's just going to pass the turn back.
Yeah, leaving Harness Lightning up. It's also convenient that last turn Ben got to attack into single mountain and know because of deck lists, this is the top 8, both players have studied the opponent's deck lists, that Lee didn't have Galvanic Bombardment or a 1-mana removal spell. Looks like Lee picked up a Thraben Inspector here. And note, Lee didn't play Concealed Courtyard last turn. It enters the battlefield tap land, but because of Smuggler's Copter, both players have incentive to hold excess lands.
So it looks like that Veteran Motorist is jumping in front of the Cultivator's Caravan, saving some life, but this does drop Ben down a 6.
And I think there's a good chance we'll see Harness Lightning finish off the Caravan end of turn, because that chump block, you'd blocked a 6/6 with a 3/1, and you have a 3-damage spell in your hand. You have incentive to try and finish it off.
Lee's going to continue by cracking that clue.
Ooh, he found a Harness Lightning. So Lee with some action here, and it looks like he's going to play that land.
There you go, and this is exactly what you were talking about. Harness Lightning, trying to take down this Cultivator's Caravan before the passing of the turn, and down it goes. And this was the biggest attacker for Lee, too, so now his forces are looking a little more meager.
Oh, that was a great draw for Ben. Ben drew Declaration in Stone.
Yeah.
And that can take out both Knight Ally tokens and not even give Lee any clues. Could also take out the 2 Thraben Inspectors, but I would say taking out 2 2/2s maybe is a little bit more appealing.
All right, so he's going to kick things off. Was that a second one?
It was.
All right, so Knight Allies going down. Lee can't do very much about that.
And now Ben definitely has the long game locked up. He still has that Sky Sovereign hand, which has kind of been sitting there. He's also got, a 3/3 flyer in Smuggler's Copter, PNLR, which has an activated ability, which will be good later, and end up in a spot where he's going to outnumber Lee in terms of cards, both quantity and qualities, but he has a much lower life total. And it looks like Lee actually fired off that Harness Lightning at some point here, because that Selfless Spirit is no longer on this planet.
We're going to see a pass back to Ben.
And that's great news for Ben. If Lee's unable to attack, unable to add to the board, Ben is just drawing much more live, both because he already has Declaration in hand and because it has that Sky Sovereign.
There you go, and Sky Sovereign finally coming down, taking down the Veteran Motorist, and things are now looking grim for Lee. Just 2 Thraben Inspectors on his side of the battlefield. Scrap Heap Scrounger, too.
And Scrap Heap Scrounger, one of the main black cards in Lee's deck, not actually a black card, but it has that black activated
Might
ability.
as well be.
And it's a great way to pressure the opponent. It's good against removal. It's a little less good when your opponent has so many powerful cards in play, and I think Ben's going to start to turn the corner here.
Also, for everyone at home, just so you know, we want to bring you all the most important games through the quarterfinals. So we do have an update from our other table. Carlos Romao is up a game versus Joey Manor, but we are going to make sure that everybody can catch most of the games. We want to show all the action that we can.
Yeah, so it looks like we're holding game 2 until this game concludes, which I don't think is gonna be very long here.
It looks like this is definitely coming to an end.
Lee does have some potential draws here, but Sky Sovereign is just such a big threat, and we might actually see a chain crew action.
Yeah,
here.
it looks like so Thopter jumping in the chopper, jumping in the Sky Sovereign, and bashing. The trigger's going to take down the Thraben Inspector.
And it actually makes perfect sense because all 3 of those creatures fly, so they're all able to reach each other.
Okay, that Declaration in Stone actually taking care of this Scrappy Scrounger permanently.
Yeah,
It does give Lee a clue, though.
which is not going to last very long.
Yep, so he immediately cracks it, and he finds a Toolcraft Exemplar. But now facing the Sky Sovereign, things are looking grim, and that's enough to pack it in. Ben Hull takes the first game here at the quarterfinals. You can see the look on his face. He's like, wow. Up a game. Can you imagine? First PT top 8?
I can't imagine being up a game in the top 8 of
Oh
Pro
my
Tour.
gosh.
It's not an experience I've had so far.
We will be bringing a lot more Magic here in the quarterfinals, but first, these messages.
Ready to take your game to the next level and start on the path to the Pro Tour? Rise to the challenge and test your skills at a local preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. To find an event near you, visit magic.wizards.com/pptq.
Test drive the top standard decks from this Pro Tour in the Pro Tour Gauntlet beginning this Wednesday on Magic Online. For more information, visit mtgo.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. We're going to be jumping across and taking a look at Carlos Romao from Brazil. He's going to be playing Jeskai Control versus Joey Manor from the U.S., and he's on white-blue flash. Luis, can you give us a quick breakdown of what you think there you see Romao? A quick breakdown of what you think we can expect in this game?
So Carlos is playing the more controlling deck. Though both decks have counterspells and they have reactive cards. Carlos is the one with the torrential Gearhulks and Fumigate and all these really good long game cards, whereas Joey Manor is playing more of an aggro control deck. Very similar. Actually, this reminds me of the Collected Companies / Blue White Spirits decks that we've seen in the last standard format. The difference being Collected Company, of course, is gone and will be surely missed. Joey is playing Rattle Chains and Selfless Spirit and Spell Queller, as well as Archangel Avacyn. So a lot of very impactful cards you can play at instant speed, and is going to try to pressure Carlos and leave his mana untapped and be, basically force Carlos to react to him, and then try to use cards like Spell Queller and Avacyn to prevent Carlos from succeeding.
So some early action already from both Carlos and Joey. It looks like the Selfless Spirit was taken down by the Harness Lightning, and the Reflector Mage coming in for not a lot of value, but it is a 2/3 body that can pressure Carlos.
It feels like it's been so long since we've seen a Reflector Mage, and here's Joey showing up with a playset of them. Not the matchup for them, though. Not only does Carlos have basically no targets for them, you don't even want to Reflector Mage
the actual
torrential
ones that he does
Gearhulk.
have, indeed.
Yes. But Joey is, of course, playing a game 1, because to remind you, this is the top 8, so we're playing best out of 5, so best 3 out of 5, but the first 2 games are played without sideboard. So even though Joey would love to sideboard out those Reflector Mages, he's not going to be able to do so until after this game.
So Reflector Mage number 2 coming down for Joey. Once again, not getting a ton of value here, but is able to pressure Carlos Romao to some good effect.
And if Carlos has something like Radiant Flames, he will be able to clear the board. See, let's say Carlos didn't have that Radiant Flames that he just played. If he was able to not clear that board there, and Joey was able to untap and play his 5th land and have Archangel Avacyn up, then Joey would be in such good shape. Carlos would be forced to tap out for something, and then Archangel Avacyn would be able to counter Radiant Flames or potentially counter a Fumigate with her Indestructible ability. But now Joey has nothing on the board, so he's going to be the one forced to tap mana first. And in fact, he's deciding whether he wants to just play a main phase Archangel Avacyn, because he knows that Carlos has Void Shatter in his deck, a counterspell. So he might just run Avacyn out there.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Avacyn coming down. Usually you see it at the end of your opponent's end step. In this case, just coming out now.
This is your main phase? Yeah. Okay.
Romao anticipating. Chooses to take a land, though. He did see an Immolating Glare and another land from that anticipate.
Find what you were looking for? Go.
I found out you were looking for, says Joey.
Well-
And he immediately plays his lands. Well, he's a control deck. He can't be missing land drops.
Yeah, Carlos, Carlos didn't play a land on turn 4. You see Joey's now multiple lands ahead. And then main phase cast Anticipate. So I think both players knew what was going on. Carlos didn't even bother trying to hide the land from the Anticipate, which, Shota Yasuoka does the same thing. And I got to say, I love it. Just play that land. Like, when you miss a land drop and then next turn you draw, shuffle cards in your hand, and play a land, like, you're not fooling anyone. They know you drew that land. So I like Carlos's style.
Thankfully, Carlos has found another island off the top.
All right, so
Couple of options in his hand. He has a lot of card draw and planeswalkers as well.
yeah, let's take a look at Carlos's hand here. He's got Dovin Bond, which does potentially mitigate Avicen's attacks. He's got Torrential Gearhook, which he can't quite cast yet, and he's got double Glimmer of Genius, which he'd love to start getting online. Summary Dismissal provides a counterspell, except he can't really expect Joey to play more spells because Joey is in the position that he wants to be in, which is having threats on board. I do think Carlos is going to eventually set up that Fumigate, though. Because he had to use the energy from Ether Hub, Carlos doesn't have double white right now. Another card we haven't seen as much as we used to, Westvale Abbey making a cleric there. So Joey, one of the advantages of playing this blue-white deck is he has a couple slots for colorless land, and he chose to fill those slots with Westvale Abbey.
All right, this is dropping Carlos Romao down to 9. Bit of a precarious life total, but he has answers for Joey.
Yeah, and if Carlos is able to Glimmer of Genius into an untapped white source, he can cast Fumigate. And what Carlos doesn't know is that Joey's hand does not have very many very many spells in it. It actually looks like Joey just has a Plains and a Selfless Spirit. It'd be pretty interesting to see whether Joey decides to put the Selfless Spirit into play.
He's choosing not to, and instead Carlos is going to follow up with his Glimmer of Genius.
Wow, that worked out much better for Carlos. Had Joey played Selfless Spirit, then the Fumigate in Carlos's hand would have not done much. But now Carlos has the option of finding a white source and playing Fumigate, assuming he can dig into one. Glimmer does scry 2, draw 2, plus Carlos gets his draw step. So Carlos gets to look at 5 cards. And then, of course, the energy from Glimmer of Genius does mean that Ether Hub is now a white source again. So Carlos actually in great shape here.
Carlos, of course, a very accomplished player. He's actually the world champion from 2002 in Sydney, and he has 4 GP titles to his name.
Yeah, it's funny. Carlos played professional Magic before I did, and I've been playing for a long time. I remember reading about his Worlds win. And,
that's so awesome.
And being like, wow, this Carlos dude is sweet. And then he played a little bit while I started, and then then he hasn't played as much these last couple years, and now he's back. He's actually won the last 2 tournaments he played in Grand Prix Atlanta and Grand Prix Sao Paulo. So if he can go 3 for 3, then that'll be great.
It was awesome yesterday when he locked in the top 8, and he had a little bit of a cheering section over by the sideline, and he had actually won. They were chanting, "The champion is back."
Yeah,
in Portuguese. It was great.
So it looks like Carlos didn't go for that Fumigate. He's leaving up Torrential Gearhulk. He actually let Joey tap out for Westvale Abbey and make another cleric there. Worth noting that because of the 2 energy from Glimmer of Genius, Torrential Gearhulk replaying Harness Lightning can take down Archangel Avicen.
Selfless Spirit.
All right, so Selfless Spirit coming down for Joey. Let's see if Carlos has anything to say about that.
Well, Selfless Spirit, I think there's a good chance it prompts Carlos to take an action here, because if he lets Selfless Spirit resolve the Gearhulk into Harness Lightning line, no longer does much.
I'm 9, right? Yeah, 9 to 18. Is that accurate?
Yeah, sorry. I took one delay from my...
Players just getting life total sorted out. All right, so this Selfless Spirit is still on the stack. Carlos Romao deciding what he wants to do. He's going to respond with that Torrential Gearhulk. All right, and it looks like... see what's going to be flashed back.
And how many times per tournament am I able to say when it rains it pours on a Torrential Gearhulk?
Well, we started the count at 1, and it's not like counts have actually stopped you before, so I'm guessing quite a bit. It looks like the Harness Lightning is triggering that Avicen, and then, Spellqueller coming in there with the ambush.
Wow, so that did not work out very well for Carlos, because Spellqueller stops that Harness Lightning. Avicen's going to get to fly over for 4. And now with the Selfless Spirit in play, Fumigate no longer a great answer, because Fumigate does destroy, and Selfless Spirit makes all of Joey's creatures indestructible. Also worth noting, Selfless Spirit will trigger Archangel Avicen. Joey very close to having lethal here. He could attack with all 3 creatures. Carlos blocks one of the tokens, takes 5, falling to 4. Selfless Spirit gets sacrificed, saving the token that gets blocked and triggering Archangel Avacyn, who will then flip on Carlos's upkeep, becoming a 6/5, purifying the board and dealing 3 to Carlos. The disadvantage, of course, that it would also deal 3 to Joey's other creatures, which kills Selfless Spirit and brings back that Harness Lightning.
So Carlos Romao a bit with his back to the wall here.
Yeah, Carlos has a ton of cards in hand. The question is, will he have time to utilize them? And the answer is, he's unlikely to be able to take advantage of all the cards. This game is going to be won or lost, for Carlos in the next couple turns. So maybe eventually he gets to get through his entire hand, but right now he's under so much pressure that the fact that he's up 5 cards against Joey just doesn't matter that much. It's the board that matters right now.
On the other hand, we see Joey. This is actually his 5th PT appearance, but first top 8.
That's not bad. Playing 5 Pro Tours and making a top 8 on the 5th one is certainly a great place to be.
All right, so it looks like the Torrential Gear Hulk, jumping in front of those Clerics. A little bit of overkill, but this does drop Carlos down to 4.
Yep.
Yeah, and Carlos Romao just taking a look at Archangel Avacyn, which...
Yeah, this triggers on your upkeep.
So,
okay, no, but
Yeah.
so now, Joey, because that token died, and it wasn't an angel, triggers Avacyn, and Joey's going to sacrifice that Selfless Spirit to make it so Avacyn doesn't kill the Spellcaller or the other token. So Carlos will fall to 1 here, and remember, Joey's creatures will be indestructible this turn.
This triggers on this deck.
yeah.
Yikes, things are looking a little rough here for Carlos. Let's see what he can string together.
Well, he does have
Can
that
you
extra
think?
energy.
Can you think what to do? Like, Fumigate doesn't help here.
Because of the 2 energy from Glimmer of Genius, and because the Selfless Spirit needed to be sacrificed now, that prompted Joey to sacrifice it. That ability is on the stack. Carlos can then cast Harness Lightning, taking down Avacyn the Purifier. The problem...
What about the other creatures, though?
Well, actually, he can string together. He can go Harness Lightning your Spellcaller, that spend the 3 energy, kill
that
Spellcaller,
yes.
chain that, Harness Lightning off the Spellcaller, kill the Avacyn using the extra 2 energy.
That's so sick. And then that just leaves the...
That'll leave the 1/1 token.
No,
No,
it's
that
on the
triggers
stack.
on the
It's on
stack.
stack. It's on stack. It's on stack.
Oh, so we are bringing you updates on what's going on, but it seems like the Avacyn trigger might have been missed.
Or
The
maybe it
damage.
didn't deal the damage.
The damage.
Yeah, which one?
Okay, looks like they fixed that.
No. This is
All right, but it looks like Carlos is that one now.
But he chose just to Harness Lightning the Avacyn. The Spellcaller and the token survive because they're indestructible. So Carlos does still have an answer here. He has Dovin Bond. Dovin Bond can -3, -0 the Spellcaller, or Carlos could actually gain 2 life off of the -1 ability on Dovin and then end up at 3 facing down a 2 power flyer.
All right, so it looks like Carlos might be able to turn the corner around. He's definitely gripping it very closely. Wandering Fumarole coming down for him.
Yeah, this is going to be a close game regardless of how it ends up. But as of right now, Carlos isn't dead. It is close.
Right, yeah, so Dovin Bond is going to tick up, targeting that Spell Queller, and that Torrential Gear Hulk is here on defense. Obviously, Dovin Bond, the +1, gives a target creature -3, -0, and activated abilities can be activated. Most importantly here is just stops the Spell Queller from attacking.
If Joey drew a Reflector Mage that turn, that would be incredible for him. He would actually be able to sneak in that last point of damage off of the Cleric. But
I'm not sure what they think we missed.
the door is closing very rapidly. See, one of the things that Carlos' deck does is once it can stabilize, it's got a lot of ways to clamp down on the game, like Summary Dismissal. I mean, when you have Summary Dismissal up, there's not a whole lot that can hurt you. So Carlos just needs to get to that point, and it looked like it was going to be difficult, but thanks to Harness Lightning and Dovin Bond, Carlos may have actually stabilized.
And Carlos has a lot going on in his hand. Between Torrential Gear Hulks, Harness Lightnings, Glimmer Genius, Summary Dismissals, Fumigate, he can play a very long game from here. He just needs to make sure he doesn't die right now.
And worth noting is that those first 4 cards you mentioned are all instants. So Carlos gets to just pass, leave all his mana up, and decide what to play based on what Joey does, which is, of course, one of the strengths of these control decks. So Carlos has a Planeswalker and a 5/6, facing down a 2/3 and a 1/1. That Westvale Abbey is going to keep cranking out 1/1s, so Carlos has to be aware of that. But Carlos is able to either use Dovin to gain life or play another removal spell in the form of Torrential Gearhulk here.
All right, so it looks like Carlos is taking a look at his graveyard as Torrential Gearhulk can flash back one of those cards.
Yeah, and note that Carlos did use that Harness Lightning, so he does need to respect that Joey can attack with 3 creatures with Carlos being at 1, and Dovin Bond can only handle 1 of those creatures, essentially. But I think Carlos has enough good options here that he's going to be able to find a way out of this. At least if, assuming Joey doesn't draw another interactive spell. Joey probably has a couple different draw steps that, get him into decent shape here.
You're on 3.
The thing he also has to worry about is that Dovin Bond is just going to slowly make it so that he can't close out this game. 1 is not 0. We all know that. But now he's at 3. Yes.
And soon it'll be 5. Planeswalkers provide good incremental advantage. So Carlos has enough mana that he can actually activate Wandering Fumarole to provide a blocker here. Because remember, Carlos, unless he casts Torrential Gearhulk, will fall to 1 from the Spell Queller. But Wandering Fumarole can block one of the 1/1s, and that could still leave up Summary Dismissal.
All right, so responding to Joey tapping out for that Westvale Abbey, it looks like another Gearhulk coming in, Harness Lightning targeting that Spell Queller. Down goes the Spell Queller, new Harness Lightning taking down one of the priests.
No, it goes back to
for the turn. So you have to choose energies. Go.
Yeah, and so why Carlos did all that, first of all, he wanted to do it when Joey's tapped out to play around additional Spell Quellers. Second of all, by killing the Spell Queller and the token, now Carlos, instead of being at 1 and facing down 3 creatures, he's at 3 and he's facing down 1 creature with 2 Gearhulks in play. So he's much, much safer. Joey's not playing a deck that can play burn spells. Carlos just needs to keep creatures off the board. Archangel Avacyn is one of the more dangerous cards Carlos has to worry about now.
Well, he essentially drew another card when he did that too, because he got the Harness Lightning that was underneath the Spell Queller. So things are looking pretty nice. But, ooh, Gideon, typically a very good card against control.
Yeah, it does pale in comparison to these gigantic Torrential Gearhulks. There's a 2 5/6 in play. And, we've seen this many times throughout the course of the tournament from both Shota Yasuoka and Carlos. These control decks are behind, they're behind. Then all of a sudden, Gearhulk, attack you for 10, and the game's just over very quickly.
And it looks like Carlos's draw for the turn was a Blessed Alliance, so continuing to inch away further from Joey, Carlos has turned the corner.
Yeah, and Blessed Alliance actually, the gain 4 life mode can be, I think, pretty relevant if Joey gets too close to alpha striking here, because Carlos can just have a turn where he goes like, untap both my Gearhulks, gain 4 life, block.
me at 17. Excuse me. You're on 3.
Kind of funny, coming into this, Carlos actually thought that Joey was a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But the way these games have played out, Carlos is looking like he's going to take a bunch of damage in most games and fall down to a very low life total. But in a long game, Carlos will eventually prevail, and he's got a lot of ways to make sure the game does stretch out.
Do you think that the matchup actually plays out the way he thinks it does?
Well,
is Joey the aggressor here, and is Carlos not a favorite?
It looks like that sideboarded games are probably end up being a little bit better for Joey than they do for Carlos, just because Joey's got cards like Stasis Snare and Reflector Mage and Declaration in Stone in his main deck that he doesn't really want. So once he gets to board and negate Summary Dismissal, Jace Unraveler of Secrets, like just cards along those lines, things do get better. But yeah, these game 1s, Carlos has, this was close. He fell to 1, was facing down many creatures, but Carlos looks like he's in firm control now.
Mm-hmm. Ticking down rather with a Dovin Bond, but it does draw him a card. He's found another Glimmer of Genius at the top, so cards continuing to flow and Carlos continuing to have a firm grip on this game.
And Joey drew a Stasis Snare here, so Joey on a Plains and a Stasis Snare. He doesn't have enough mana to activate Westvale Abbey and play Stasis Snare if he plays that land, but those Gearhulks are really keeping Joey on the back foot. And again, Carlos, go back to his hand. He's got a million cards in it. He's got double Glimmer of Genius, Summary Dismissal, Fumigate, Blessed Alliance. If you're Carlos, you're feeling pretty good about this game. You're feeling like your opponent has so few ways to actually win, and you have good answers for those ways, that as long as you are able to not randomly die to Ormondal coming out of Westvale Abbey or Gideon sneaking in somehow, you're probably going to win.
So that's Stasis.
Missed.
Yeah. So swing and a miss. Stasis there was attempting to take down one of those Gear Hulks, but Summary Dismissal meets that, and it's going to go ahead and counter it. Now Joey has to decide if he wants to do anything else.
Seen a lot more main deck Summary Dismissals than I expected at this tournament. I guess people really were prepared for the Etherworks Marvel deck.
All right. Glimmer of Genius continuing to provide some energy. Scry 2. Couple of lands off the top.
And earlier in the game, Carlos would be incredibly happy to find those lands, but right now he's just looking for action.
Yeah, remember, he missed land drops at the beginning of this game. It looked like he might be too far behind.
Joey's always in the spot where, like, your opponent misses, their 4th land drop and then their 5th land drop, and you're like feeling pretty good. But then they hit 2 land drops, and you just know that they have all spells in hand, and it's just so hard to win.
And it looks like the large vehicles deck continues to prevail. Ben Hull is actually up another game over Li Shiqian.
Joey grabbing a drink of water, and Carlos, providing him with a little bit more with thanks to those torrential gearhooks. And in a manner that's typical of control decks, Carlos is attacking with those gear hooks, but there's a pretty good chance he's just attacking that Gideon rather than Joey's life total. We'll see in a second here.
Can I block? Sure.
Joey wanting to, very eager to go to blocks. Those 2 creatures are ready to jump in front and protect that Gideon.
It's possible that we see Carlos use up Dovinbon completely and just deploy a second one, but yeah, Carlos has got a lot of options here, and he did have to use that Summary Dismissal, so he's running a little shorter on instant speed interaction than he was before, but because of Dovinbon ticking down, Carlos's life total is ticking up. He's at 7 right now, so technically Joey could animate Gideon, attack for 7 with the Gideon plus the Knight, but at the very least Wandering Fumarole would give Carlos an out, plus we know about that Blessed Alliance, and I think I got a glimpse of Archangel Avacyn. Between Avacyn and Blessed Alliance, there's not a lot of ways combat goes well for Joey here. And, it's funny that Joey, has taken a couple points of damage. So far, he's lost 4 life to Westphal. I mean, that's the damage he's taken this game. He might go from 16 to 0 if Carlos goes Flash and Avacyn, attack with 2 Gear Hulks and a Wandering Fumarole. Something along those lines.
All right, so the Knight Ally has no fear, attempting to take down this Dovinbon. Gets ambushed by Archangel Avacyn. Joey can't do much about that. Says yup, and that Archangel Avacyn jumps in front of the Knight. It was a very valiant but foolish Knight.
Joey sitting on a Plains in hand, which is basically what it feels like his hand's been in the entire game. And one of the disadvantages of Joey's deck is if he doesn't draw Thraven Inspector or Smuggler's Copter, his deck can be prone to mana flood. He's playing 25 lands with no raw card draw. Whereas Carlos is playing, 4 copies of Glimmer of Genius. He's playing Anticipate. He's playing Torrential Gearhook. Carlos has a lot more card selection. The downside being his deck is slower, but this game's lasted long enough that Carlos has really started to pull ahead.
So the Glimmer of Genius is going to find Carlos another Anticipate, so continuing to find even more cards, and then also a Stasis Snare. God, and he has a grip full of cards. This is looking very difficult for Joey now. Do you think there's any sequence of events that gets him out of this? He's just getting drowned over here.
Joey would need something amazing involving Archangel Avacyn, but I don't even know what that is given the fact that he has a Plains in hand right now. Like if Joey drew 3 spells in a row starting 2 turns ago, I could see it. But it's going to be very difficult for Joey to get out there. Torrential Gearhooks raining down on Joey, taking out Gideon. And once Yeah, once Carlos has started to turn the corner, it's really hard for Joey to get back into it. And there goes the Archangel Avison. I mean, that's the card Joey wanted to draw, but I don't know if she'll be enough. She's a very powerful card. As you can see, was Carlos using her very well. But I guess her ability doesn't come up all that often here to flip in Carlos's deck. She's just basically like, in this game, a glorified Ambush Viper.
Do you think there was anything Joey could have done earlier to maybe try to sneak a couple more points of damage?
He had the one turn where if he had drawn a Reflector Mage, the Westvale Cultist would have actually finished the job.
Oh.
But, once that opportunity passed, I never really saw a way for Joey to get the last point of damage in. He got Carlos down to 1, but he was just a card short turn after turn.
All right, so it looks like 2 more mana for an Anticipate.
And Carlos is basically just making sure he doesn't lose this game, even though he really doesn't need to see more cards.
Oh,
I mean,
he has all the bases covered. I mean, he has every counter spell or removal spell you can possibly think of, along with these 2 Gear Hulks and the Avison and an active Dovin and a backup one just in case.
He's even got Wandering Fumarol's hiding down there if he really needed to, but I suppose 1 Fumarole could make it so.
Right, how about Archangel Avison?
All right.
All right. Kicking things off, let's see what Carlos Romao has to say about that. 7 cards in hand.
So even if Carlos uses Stasis Snare on Archangel Avison, her indestructible ability will protect those 2 ground blockers if they run in front of the Torrential Gear Hulks.
This is just buying them time, though.
Yep.
Yeah, this doesn't progress
Yeah.
Joey's plans. It means he doesn't die this turn, but Joey's at 1 now. The tables have fully turned.
Yes.
All right, so Dovin taking up, targeting that Knight ally, and still fighting an uphill battle. 2 lands in hand for Joey.
Combat. Sure. Attack you. Okay. Activate my Westvale Levy.
I like Joey's style.
And concede. Romao is up 2 games over Joey Manor.
Keep his actions.
And this is the end of pre-sideboard games. So let's actually take a look and see how the players will sideboard for this game.
Creatures die to state-based effects. Players die to state-based actions.
Actually, before we get there, we're actually going to jump into our other match, and then we will take a look at that.
All right, Ben Hull, once you finally get to take the deck into the station for a tune-up after sideboarding, what are you bringing in and what are you taking out for this matchup?
I'm going to bring in removal. I'm going to get the Fragmentize in. He has Copters and Caravans, the Harness Lightning, the Bombardments, the Weavers, maybe Gideon or 2. I'm taking out Toolcraft Exemplar, Fleet Wheel Cruiser, and maybe shave some Pias and Selfless Spirits.
All right. Ben Hull, good games the rest of the way here in the top 8. All right, I'm here with Lishi Tian. Li, what cards are we going to expect to see from you after sideboarding?
I will bring in Galvanic Bombardment, and then I will bring in the Sky Sovereign. And if I am on the play, I will try to go on the plan. I will bring out Gideon, and then I keep all the aggressive creatures. And if I'm on draw, I will bring out the creatures that are only good at attacking, which is the Exemplar and the Scrounger, because they are very bad and defensive game. Yeah. So and then I will bring in extra Gideon, so we play a longer game.
All right, good games the rest of the way here in the top 8.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So we're jumping over to see Ben Hull versus Lishi Chen. We will be bringing you updates on what happens with Carlos Romao and Manor Joey. So, Luis, post-board, you just heard what the players are going to do when they're moving post-board, but do you think this favors either of the players? Or who plays, actually?
So, Ben is up 2-0, and actually, looking at sideboards, I don't think either player gets a huge advantage post-board. Hull actually sideboards more cards, and he's already up 2-0, so that's got to be great news for him.
Hull is taking a mulligan, though.
Yeah, and mulliganing will decrease his chances of winning this game because he'll have 7 cards in his opening hand instead of 6.
Expert level analysis.
One of the features of post-board games with decks like this is both players, we saw them get interviewed about their sideboarding choices, is that they tend to take out some of the aggressive creatures for more removal. So remember what we saw in game one, a kind of like long drawn-out game, went to attrition. You're just going to see more of that. There's now fewer attacking creatures and more removal spells. So these decks kind of turn into like hybrid control decks. Like they're both just trying to wear down the opponent. And you see cards like Weaver of Lightning and Galvanic Bombardment really just play into that.
Weaver of Lightning seems like great sideboard technology here.
I've been very impressed with it so far. We saw Shota Yasuoka sideboarded
it was fantastic for him.
Grixis deck. And then even though the red-white deck that Ben Hull is playing is a little less well-equipped to take advantage of Weaver, it's still going to be good here.
All right, well, it looks like Lee's still continuing with a relatively fast start.
Yeah, it looks like a Toolcraft Exemplar once we get back there.
So Inspiring Vantage, another one.
And
Toolcraft Exemplar, and yeah, the Scrounger having nice synergy here with the Toolcraft Exemplar.
Yeah, it's funny because you think of Scrap Heap Scrounger as just like a recursive threat, a way to pressure the opponent and fight back against removal spells. It actually has a nice little combo with Toolcraft Exemplar there.
All right, Luis, let's take a look and see what the players have in their opening hands and what we have in store here. So Toolcraft Exemplar, 2 Harness Lightning, so a lot of remover and a Concealed Courtyard coming down for Lee. On the other hand, we have Hull with Smuggler's Copters, a couple of the Weaver of Lightning technology, Harness Lightning, Inspiring Vantages too.
So Ben is playing a sideboarded game, kind of like what we expected, where he's going to go Harness Lightning into Weaver of Lightning for the max Lightning combos, and looks like he actually drew a Fragmentize. So he's got removal and defensive creatures, whereas Lee actually opened on 2 aggressive 1-drops. The problem is without that Scrap Heap Scrounger, Toolcraft Exemplar, well, it doesn't really live up to its name. It's just a 1/1. So Lee really needs to find an artifact here.
It's kind of ironic that Toolcraft Exemplar says that if you want to start with the finest work, you must start with the finest tools. But they're actually starting with a bunch of scraps.
Yeah. Scrap Heap Scrounger feels like it doesn't fit into that paradigm. So, interestingly enough, Ben did go with a Smuggler's Copter this turn. And wow, Thraben Inspector.
Wow, that was the mono combo of a Clue and the Exemplars. They actually managed to get in there for 6 damage. That's a ton of damage, too. Any reason not to play the Weaver Lightnings here?
Yeah, I'm curious what... I think that Ben may not have wanted to expose it to removal. He wanted to play Weaver and then play a spell in the same turn. It could be one of the reasons. But he ended up in a spot where he just took a lot of extra damage that turn. So we'll see how well that works out.
Yeah, he's falling pretty far behind. And he doesn't seem like he'll be able to do 2 spells 1 turn here either.
So he can fragmentize that Clue.
He does have the fragmentize.
Which is not the dream play, but I actually think that he's got a pretty good incentive to think about that. Like, if he fragmentized a Clue, he can trigger Weaver and kill one of the Toolcraft Exemplars. On the other hand, Lee can sack the Clue, so that just does not sound very appealing. Ben really needs to untap. If he can untap and cast Harness Lightning here and take down multiple creatures, he's going to be in pretty good shape. If he's unable to do that, though, then he might still be getting attacked. And, wow, Unlicensed Disintegration. If Lee casts Unlicensed Disintegration, it'll take down the Weaver. It'll deal 3 damage to Ben because of that Clue. And then Lee can actually just attack for 7.
Wow, so this is interesting. Ben does definitely take in on this more controlling approach, but Lee's just absolutely crushing here. This is incredibly aggressive. Look at this. All right, so, okay, Weaver Lightning animating the Smuggler's Copter. And down it goes. He even has an artifact, too, and that is the game. That was so fast.
So we lead in by like, yeah, it's going to be grindier. Both players have more aggro or more control. Lee goes 1-drop, 1-drop, 1-drop. Kill your creature, take 3. Kill you on turn 5.
Yeah.
So, well, there we go.
There you go. Well, it's interesting because this might change. This might change how Lee wants to go post-board because he's seeing these Weaver Lightnings. That could be pretty scary. But in the meantime, let's jump over to our other match. Let's see how these players are choosing to sideboard.
I'm here with Carlos Romao. Carlos, when you get to go to your sideboard, what are the cards we can expect to see you bringing in for this matchup?
Okay, so the cards I want to bring in is Gideon, Spell Queller, and I'm gonna try Blessed Alliance. that's the cards I'm gonna put in the deck. I think Spell Queller is gonna help me to block some of his important creatures. So I think it's gonna be actually my biggest plan on the matchup that is not that good for me.
What do you take out to make room for those cards?
Sure. So it looks kind of crazy, but I'm thinking the Fumigate's gonna get out of my deck because I think it's too heavy against his deck. He plays all his creatures at the end of my turn, so like I'm gonna wait. Like, and he has the Avacyn Angel, he has the Sapphire Spirit, so I don't think Fumigate gonna work for him. I also gonna take out the counters because they are too slow with him. Like they're gonna, I don't want to be tap out every time, so I don't want to wait for him to do something. I want to be active at the game. I want to try to get the game to my side. So I think the counters and the Fumigate's gonna get out. Yeah, and that's it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, good games the rest of the way here in the top 8.
Thank you.
All right, Joey Manor, tell me what your sideboard plan is once you get to go to it. What cards are coming in, what cards are coming out here for you?
Well, the cards I like in the matchup are Summary Dismissal, Negate, and Jace Unraveler Secrets. The main deck cards that I don't like are Reflector Mage and Declaration in Stone. So I'm going to board those 5 out for 2 Negates, 2 Jaces, and a Summary Dismissal. And I don't know if I want to bring in the second Summary Dismissal yet, but we'll see how I feel at the matchup. I think it might be play draw dependent.
Okay, Joey Manor, good games the rest of the way here in the top 8.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. Let's jump in and see the players have sideboarded. Let's see how this sideboard game goes for them. Luis, once the players are able to sideboard, do you think this favors either of them?
Carlos does get Spell Queller, which, as he pointed out, is going to be a great addition to his deck post-board. But I think that Joey is making bigger gains because Joey is taking out cards like Reflector Mage, which is so ineffective against Carlos' deck, for cards like Negate and Jason, Summary Dismissal, which are all very, very good. So I would expect it to help Joey more than Carlos, though Carlos being up 2-0 means that he's still in a very good position because this is best out of 5. Carlos just needs to win one more match.
It looks like Carlos does not have blue mana in his hand, actually. I see a Plains at the very end, but he might be missing the rest, so he has lands, just maybe not the ones he needs. Yeah, it looks like just a couple Plains.
Well, Carlos running into one of the drawbacks of playing 3 colors. Sometimes you just draw 2 of your 3 colors, though the good thing for Carlos is he's got, Harness Lightning, Immolating Glare, Radiant Flames, just like a bunch of cheap red and white interactive spells, and his only blue card, Glimmer of Genius, costs single blue.
Yeah, what about a Spire Bluff Canal off the top? Things are rolling now.
Yeah, that works out pretty well.
All right, so Spell Queller sneaking in at the very end of the turn. Not countering anything, but it is a 2-power attacker.
And Carlos got to feel pretty good about that. The fact that Joey's running out of Spell Queller means that Joey just didn't have any other threats, and Joey does feel like he has to pressure Carlos. He doesn't have all the time in the world.
All right, so Immolating Glare. Down goes that Spell Queller. No attacks for you, my friend. It's like a Port Town revealing a Prairie Stream. All right. So this is a nice window for him to resolve a Gideon because Carlos Romao, for the most part, was tapped out.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos wanted to take it out right away.
Yeah, so Quarantine Field, it takes it down. He does leave a little Knight Ally and a little bit of a threat behind, but still Joey needs a little bit more pressure before he can actually take down this game.
Yeah, and that was a good exchange for Joey. They both spent 4 mana. Joey ends up with a 2-2, but like you said, he's just not... He's not going to kill Carlos with a 2-2. Joey needs to resolve something like this Archangel Avacyn in order to really get the job done.
Let's take a peek at his hand, actually. Boop. So Smuggler's Copter and 2 Archangel Avacyns.
And once again, Joey's in a spot where he was in game 2, where he's deciding whether he wants to main phase Archangel Avacyn. Last time he chose to do so. This time he decided against it. And I think part of the reason he may have decided against it this time was Carlos just has Spire Bluff Canal as his only blue source, so casting Void Shatter is not something Carlos can do right now.
I'll try Archangel Avacyn.
All right, so he is going to attempt this at the end of the turn. Carlos just plays a Plains for his turn.
And now Carlos is in the same spot where he has decided whether he wants to tap out for his spell while Joey's unable to counter it, because that Glimmer of Genius is a card Carlos really wants to resolve. So there's a chance Carlos just wants to go Glimmer of Genius right now, make sure I can't get negated.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he's going to opt for. So this does also give a window for Joey next turn. If he wants to resolve something, he'll be able to. That Archangel Avison, though, is a nice threat by itself. He's choosing to draw both cards. It was a Torrential Gear Hulk and a Harness Lightning.
She fits.
Yeah. It's the speculative Torrential Gear Hulk. Carlos is choosing to pick it up despite not actually having double blue yet, but he figures that the game's going to go long enough. He'll draw another blue source, and Torrential Gear Hulk is the kind of card he wants.
Well, Gear Hulks are also integral to the general strategy of this deck, so just having the first one also seems pretty good.
And they tend to chain, because when you play one and you hit Glimmer of Genius, you can often find a second one.
So Joey took that window of opportunity to resolve that Smuggler's Copter, which is good against Wrath, although we know that Carlos has chosen to take out the Fumigates from his deck. It's still nice to have it out on the battlefield.
Yeah, and the Radiant Flames in Carlos' hand is the sorcery speed removal that he's going with, which the Copter does avoid.
Into the minivan?
Enter the minivan? All right. New favorite nickname for Smuggler's Copter. Looks like the minivan is live. Harness Lightning is going to be targeting Archangel Avison.
The synergy between Harness Lightning and Glimmer of Genius apparent here, as Carlos has 2 energy left over from Glimmer, so he's actually going to be potentially successful here. You know, Joey has a second copy of Archangel Avison, so he can play Archangel Avison as a removal spell, or you can actually just play that spell caller.
He has a spell caller too. Spell caller trying to prevent this from happening. Let's see what happens here.
Well, Carlos has another Harness Lightning. Let's take a look at Carlos' hand
Carlos do
here.
anything about this?
And that second
he
Harness...
has a spell queller.
And he also has a spell queller. So Carlos can answer this in numerous ways here. He can let spell queller resolve. It exiles Harness Lightning. Then Harness Lightning number 2, kill the spell queller, replay Harness Lightning number 1. Or he can spell queller the spell queller. Either way, I suspect Archangel Avison is going to be hitting the graveyard this turn. Just Carlos has to decide which of his answers he wants to use.
All right, so Carlos here in the tank deciding there's a ton. This is where on Magic Online we just see all these spells on the stack.
Yeah. So currently we've got Harness Lightning targeting Archangel Avison, Spell Queller on the stack, Carlos deciding whether he wants to respond to Spell Queller with Spell Queller or let Spell Queller resolve. It exiles Harness Lightning. Second Harness Lightning kills Spell Queller. That puts Harness Lightning number 1 back on the stack, which can then take down Archangel Avison.
Okay.
So I think we're going to see a Spell Queller here.
In the stack,
yeah,
the trigger is not on the stack, just the spell. Okay.
Oh, so he's actually with the spell queller on the stack.
All right, so Carlos actually going to option number 3, which is to take down Archangel Avison and preserve that Harness Lightning under a spell queller, which, you know, Carlos will actually kind of have access to later. If he kills that spell queller,
I can't choose not to excel it, right?
At some point he's going to be able to unleash the Harness Lightning. And Joe's asking if he has to spell queller Harness Lightning. The answer is yes.
Okay. Then I will choose to do so.
Yeah, it looks like Joey was also aware of what you were saying. It's almost a liability to have it underneath there at this point.
Zero points. Sure. Takes 3.
All right, so it looks like the chopper gets in there for 3. A Thraben Inspector, also providing an extra clue for Joey. We're going to see a pass back to Carlos.
And the advantage of doing it this way is that Carlos can now Radiant Flames and take down everything else, but then that Harness Lightning does kind of disappear into the void. It doesn't end up actually killing anything. Though Radiant Flames is still going to end up working out well for Carlos because
he has that 9 life. He has to make sure that he preserves his life total here as well.
Carlos really would like to not see another creature to pilot that, Smuggler's Copter. We'll go with that for now, even though I like Joey calling it a minivan.
Yeah. All right, so he is going to opt for the Radiant Flames. Casting it for 3. Away goes everything. Smuggler's Copter still there on the battlefield, but now the board is clean.
I think the Harness Lightning...
So it stays exiled, right?
Yeah.
So Spellcaller died.
Yeah, people are trying to figure out exactly what happens with that Harness Lightning that was sitting underneath a Spell Queller.
Unfortunately,
you cannot cast it, so it remains exiled.
Sure.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. You're not? Sure.
Yeah, so there are no targets for Carlos, so it remains exiled.
Take a look at what Joey's got here. He's got another Smuggler's Copter, which is not currently able to help pilot the first one, but he does have Archangel Avacyn, so it might tilt the balance back towards casting Archangel Avacyn main phase if it'll allow him to tackle Smuggler's Cup.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's going to opt for. Archangel Avacyn enters the battlefield. It triggers. So with the trigger on the stack, Carlos can choose if he wants to do anything here. Looks like he has a Gear Hulk and a Spell Queller in hand. This resolves. Copter's getting in there.
And Joey had a neat little trick too with Archangel's indestructible trigger on the stack, animate the Smuggler's Copter. That way it'll then get the indestructible, so it'll be protected from something like Immolate and Glare.
Yeah, that's very cute.
The Harness Lightning would still work. Carlos would just play it in response.
I have 2 currently, yes.
All right, so it looks like he has looted away a Stasis there. He has a second one in hand, so there's no need for the first one. The last card left on his hand is also a Smuggler's Copter.
Kind of unfortunate for Carlos this turn. I don't think he's got a great window to play any spells here. You can play a Spell Queller, but it just doesn't line up all that well against Copter or Avacyn, so Carlos might just play it in order to have a chump blocker.
All right, you got it.
Yeah, and that's going to happen at the end of the turn. Spell Queller coming out.
Looking pretty good that Carlos left that Gear Hulk on top with that Glimmer of Genius, because he found the double blue last turn. And now he can just run out Torrential Gear Hulk and Harness Lightning the Avacyn if he wants. That does leave him with a Spell Queller against a Smuggler's Copter at 6 life, so that's somewhat precarious position for Carlos.
Does he have any other way to deal with it? He does not. He just has a couple lands in hand. All right, so here comes a Gear Hulk. Yeah, let's see if Joey has anything to say about that. He does not. Harness Lightning targeting that Archangel Avacyn.
All your energy?
Yeah, using all the energy. Down goes the Archangel Avacyn. No way to deal with that Copter for now.
Joey just needs to draw a creature. And Joey drew another Smuggler's Copter, so now he's actually Copter flooded. He's got 3 Smuggler's Copters and no one to drive them.
You have 1 card?
The good thing for Joey, though, he's got a Stasis Snare. If he takes out that Torrential Gear Hulk, he's at 20 life facing down a Spell Queller. Eventually, he's going to draw a creature, and once he does, he's going to be able to start pressuring Carlos's life total very quickly.
And here we're also seeing how important Glimmer of Genius has been to Carlos's strategy in general, because he hasn't been able to cast out many this game, and usually this is how he continues being at this stage of the game and just still having a ton of cards to play. But right now, with just 2 lands, the Stasis Snare takes care of the Gear Hulk, and now he's still facing these 2 Copters.
And so Carlos can't be feeling great about this, but he does at least know that Joey doesn't have a creature to play.
Looks like Carlos finds a Plains off the top.
Joey would get 2 creatures in play on the same turn. I guess he can go chain Thraben Inspector into something else.
Oh no, he drew... Oh wow, he drew a Westvale Abbey.
Oh wow, that was an amazing draw.
Yeah.
I will make a 1/1 down to 90 life. Get into the card.
I thought he just drew a Copter for the turn, but I guess that Westvale Abbey is awesome at crewing one of these Copters.
And I think that 3rd Copter is...
Oh, it is a 3rd Copter.
Not
Okay.
going to be something Joey is super interested in, though he doesn't really need
Doesn't really need
Plains
another
either.
land, so... All right, so Spell Queller jumping in front of that Smuggler's Copter. Wow. And this is also such a good way for him to continue creating creatures that don't actually have to be cast, so Carlos Romao can't even counter them.
Yeah, and Carlos sitting on 2 more lands in hand, so this is where the lack of a raw card draw spell like Sphinx of Revelation or just like drawing a second Glimmer of Genius would have been very, very good. And now Joey actually has a lethal. If he sends in both Smuggler's Copters, he has to decide whether he wants to risk running into some of Carlos' removal. I suspect Smuggler's Copter will be attacking in some way, shape, or form here, though.
18 life.
All right. Take 1 life.
They'll both get to the card.
Yep. Crew. Both Copters.
Can I attack you?
Attack.
Sure.
Go on a trigger.
And Carlos getting a little bit more information here off of whatever Joey chooses to draw and then discard.
All right, so 3rd Copter down. Porton is down. And that's going to do it. Joey Manor takes the first sideboarded game here at the quarterfinals. Did that play out the way you expected it to once the players had gone post-board?
Well, Joey didn't actually draw any of his sideboard cards, but he was able to pressure Carlos in kind of the way his deck was designed to do. Carlos did draw Spell Queller, but both players ended up playing Spell Quellers into empty boards that game, and that's not really what they want to be doing. So the way the cards lined up just did not work out very well for Carlos.
Yeah, it seems like he was definitely a little bit flooded over there. Let's jump across and see Ben Hall versus Li Chan.
So reminder, this is game 4. Ben Hull is up 2-1. It's a best of 5 game, and both players have sideboarded at this point. Ben Hull going to be increasing those stats very, very rapidly. His lifetime earnings going from $250 to 5 digits after this weekend.
So, Luis, on the last game, we saw a really aggressive start from Lee, and then Ben trying to play a more controlling game, but he just kind of got run over. Do you think this is going to affect much how Lee is going to board this game, knowing that there's Weavers of Lightning coming in and potentially just, you know, pew, 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 just shooting down all his attackers?
I would be a lot less excited to have cards like Toolcraft Exemplar in my deck if I knew my opponent was bringing Weaver of Lightning, but it's possible that because Lee doesn't have a massive amount of cards to sideboard in, it looked like he was interested in bringing in just Galvanic Bombardment and Sky Sovereign.
So does he just go for broke, keep
Yeah,
him in, and try to go fast?
He just doesn't have a ton of cards that he can actually end up bringing out.
All right, so it looks like Thraven Inspector crewing that Copter. Ben finds a Veteran Motorist off the top.
And it looks like Ben has a Galvanic Bombardment in hand. I'll go take a look here, but unfortunately doesn't have a great target for it because Inventor's Apprentice is a 2/3 right now, and the Smuggler's Copter, of course, will be a 3/3 when animated.
Yeah, so he's just going to take the turn and cast that Veteran Motorist. He gets this Scry. It looks like there's a Gideon and a Harness Lightning on top.
Harness Lightning certainly sounds appealing. The second copy of Gideon, when you have 3 lands, maybe a little less so. Lee on some removal of his own here. You can see Harness Lightning and Unlicensed Disintegration in Lee's hand, as well as a backup Smuggler's Copter.
So he's chosen to go top-bottom. We'll find out shortly what he kept on top.
Well, the third land for Lee means that he does have removal, but, you know, Lee's actually getting pressured fairly well here. He can kill one of Ben's creatures, but that leaves him getting attacked by either Smuggler's Copter or Veteran Motorist, assuming that Third Inspector is not the target here. And even though Lee can attack back for 3, the fact that Ben was on the play means that Ben kind of has the initiative.
Right, so Lee tapping 3 here for Depala. And this is nice synergy here with both the Copter and
the Apprentice getting to attack.
And the Apprentice getting to attack.
So Lee's threatening 6 damage here. Veteran Motorist could trade for Inventor's Apprentice.
Yep, and the Veteran Motorist jumping in front of the Apprentice. Still going to be taking some damage from that Copter. And then we're going to see a pass back. So Ben sitting at 14 now. Let's see what he's kept on top.
Well, you know, despite these Weavers of Lightning looking like that they're well positioned here, we actually haven't seen Ben able to string together a turn where he does play Weaver and actually get leverage out of it. So even though Ben has Harness Lightning in his hand and Galvanic Bombardment, these like good cheap spells, this matchup has ended up being fast enough that he's not able to play Weaver, then untap, and then use it. In fact, it looks like he discarded the Weaver to Smuggler.
Yes, he has. So they're almost playing a more traditional game, and this looks a lot more like their pre-board games.
Yeah, we just saw that one game post-board where Lee just played 2 Toolcraft Exemplars and went to town, but this game, both players are just trading off cards here. You trade off Inventor's Apprentice for Veteran Motorist, and then Harness Lightning for Depala. Both players improving the card quality of their hands thanks to Smuggler's Copter.
All right, so Veteran Motorist giving Lee an opportunity to scry. He decides he likes neither of those cards, going to ship them both to the bottom. All right, Motorist getting in there. Yep. Copter attacking for 4.
And Lee really not having the opportunity to play multiple spells here. He's scrying, he's looting, but he's playing 1 spell per turn. And Ben is getting to the point where he will be able to play multiple spells. Like getting to Galvanic Bombardment, this Veteran Motorist end of turn is really, really valuable because now Ben can play a Gideon. He can crew and attack with Smuggler's Copter. He could also, if he really wanted to, leave Smuggler's Copter back on defense. The risk with that is if Lee Tian plays Depala or Veteran Motorist, then obviously he's got a 4/4 Smuggler's Copter, and if Lee has a removal spell, like, say, Unlicensed Disintegration, then leaving back a Copter to block does not work out well.
All right, so Ben takes this opportunity to resolve this Gideon, ally of Zendikar. And his board is looking very nice here against just a mere Copter over on the other side of the battlefield for Lee.
And Lee needs a creature here. He has Unlicensed Disintegration and Harness Lightning, but he needs his last card to be something capable of crewing that Smuggler's Copter. Looks like he found a Concealed Courtyard.
Yeah, this is not a creature. This is looking grim.
So now Lee has 2 removal spells in hand, but he's facing down Gideon. And Gideon, as we've seen many, many times in this and previous Standard, Gideon's just great against removal spells. The Planeswalker that makes a Knight every turn is indestructible when it attacks. Like, you're not going to beat Gideon with Harness Lightning and Unlicensed Disintegration.
This is the threat of running things like multiple vehicles in your deck. If you are vehicle flooded and you don't have enough pilots, you get into the situation like this. This Copter's not doing a whole lot for Lee.
And we see Ben go, Harness Lightning, Galvanic Bombardment, Trade My Motorist for Inventor's Apprentice, and all of a sudden Lee's in a spot where he's got a Smuggler's Copter that are sitting idly by. So he's going to be able to take out Ben's Smuggler's Copter. And Ben actually on Fragmentize and deciding whether he wants to just kill the Copter beforehand just to make sure.
Yeah, and that's what he's going to opt for.
And it's actually a great play too, because now if Lee casts Unlicensed Disintegration, he doesn't have an artifact in play anymore. And Ben didn't animate his Smuggler's Copter first, so he wasn't able to kill that.
All right, so it looks like the Thraben Inspector getting into that Copter. Gideon becoming a creature. And now we're going to see a big attack here from Ben.
Yeah, and Lee has to... It is lethal, so Lee's going to play a removal spell here. So he's got to decide whether he wants to use one of his removal spells before Copter gets to attack.
Yeah, it looks like Harness Lightning attempting to take down that Copter.
Lee's 1 draw step away from being eliminated from the top 8 here. Lee falls to 3.
Oh, and there's a handshake. Ben Hulk takes down the quarterfinals, eliminating the competition. It looks like Marty Vehicles does not get here today, and we see a lot of excitement over there for Ben. Congratulations to him, and good luck in stage 2 of the quarterfinals. You see him breathe a sigh of relief.
Well, this weekend has vastly exceeded his expectations, and winning the first match here is critical in his path to becoming a Pro Tour champion.
That'll do it for that side of the quarterfinals. We are moving back to our other match. It looks like our players are just taking a very quick break, so we'll be bringing you that action momentarily.
And let's talk about how this matchup can change a little bit post-sideboard here. So we mentioned that Reflector Mage came out for Joey, and he got a few more counter spells. One of the things that I find the most interesting when you watch these 2 decks play, and we saw both players do this, is when their opponent's tapped out, they're just going to run out instants just on their own turn or in their own end step. And deciding when to do that is going to be a really critical part of this matchup, because if you play an Avacyn on your own turn when your opponent's tapped out, you're not getting any advantage out of the Indestructible trigger. And if you wait and you get counterspelled, like something like Void Shatter, for example, then you ended up giving up a lot there too. And we saw Joey actually do it 2 different ways over the first 2 games. And that, that indicates to me that he understands what's going on with the matchup and how to play against counterspells. Which isn't surprising given that he's playing a deck full of counterspells and he's in the top 8. So I like seeing these battles between the what I would describe as a full control deck and an aggro control deck, because just seeing the counterplay there is really interesting.
Another interesting thing here, Luis, is we know that the Fumigates are coming out of the sideboard, or out of the main deck actually from Carlos, but there are still things like Radiant Flame. So how does that affect how Joey wants to pace out his threats?
He's a little bit more willing to play to the board than he would be in Game 1. Like in Game 1, you don't want to just end up with 5 creatures in play and no answer to Fumigate. I think he will have predicted that Carlos is going to have fewer Fumigates in his deck. In fact, Carlos has none. And as a result, especially if Joey has creatures that are slightly larger and can get around Radiant Flames, he's not going to worry too much about a sweeper. He's much more concerned about cards like Torrential Gearhulk or spot removal like Harness Lightning or Immolating Glare.
And here we're getting a nice view of the feature match area. We saw that Eager Construct. Eager to watch some Magic, actually.
Oh, it's watched a lot of Magic this weekend.
And there we see also the Eternal Trophy. The bottom part gets to stay here, and the top part is actually what the players would win. Did you get a chance to see your name on the trophy?
I did. I looked it up. The names of every Pro Tour champion are inscribed on the trophy. Be interesting to see also how much this blue-white flash deck takes off after this tournament, because this is a deck that felt like it was almost their last standard and is very clearly real this standard. You know, the
Were you guys, how close were you guys to considering Team CFB and now Associates, I suppose, to playing something like that last PT?
The last Pro Tour for Pro Tour Eldritch Moon, we almost played Blue-White Spirits with Collected Company.
Okay.
Because of the interactions between Rattle Chain, Selfless Spirit, Spellcaller being the biggest kind of incentive, and then Noblegast Herald, a card that Joey is not playing today, but I think is a card you'd want to keep in mind. This, the 2/1 with flash that taps a creature whenever you play a spirit, and the interaction between all these flash spirits is something that Joey has used to his advantage. Rattle Chains in particular, 2 mana for a 2/1 flash that gives one of your spirits hexproof is a very good counter to a removal spell, and has a lot of synergy with both Spell Queller and Selfless Spirit. I also like seeing, Archangel Avacyn and Reflector Mage and Spell Queller just teaming up once again, since it's always funny when a standard rotates, as it did with Kaladesh coming out. What cards you go from being kind of like omnipresent to, whoa, people are still playing Reflector Mage?
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of Smuggler's Copters this weekend. We've actually seen a lot of Grim Flayers, though not in this particular top 8. And
we did see quite a bit of Grim Flayers just generally through the Pro Tour, the Swiss portion of the tournament.
Yeah, there were a lot of black-green decks.
Yeah.
But there are fewer Reflector Mages, not than expected, because I think it was rightfully not on most people's radar, but fewer than you maybe would have predicted a couple months ago.
Yeah, it seems like they were trying to go for a little bit more of an aggressive start as opposed to at the last Pro Tour, where the goal seemed to be just how quickly can you get Emrakul out. Obviously, this time we have Aetherworks Marvel, which changes things a little bit. But
we've seen a lot more turn 4 Emrakuls than turn 8 Emrakuls.
Yes.
Last Pro Tour, it was featured a lot more hardcast Emrakuls.
And it looks like our players are ready to kick things off here. Just to bring you an update, it looks like, wow, so it looks like Joey has actually kept a 1-lander and he's mulliganed to 6. So we will see if that pans out or not. Yes, there are no lands in hand.
Yeah, it looks like he scryed to the bottom. This is a big draw start for Joey. Does he hit his second land? He does not.
Oh my goodness. All right, so a clue coming down for Joey, but
Oh no, I missed my land drop.
and he loudly announces he did miss his land drop, and this could be over quickly if he doesn't find a land soon.
I really feel for Joey, but I know if you're in Carlos's seat, all you're thinking of is like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, quarterfinals too.
Yeah, and so Carlos is, he's going to try to end this game as quickly as possible.
And it looks like that Spell Queller going in there for the ambush and eating that Thraben Inspector, and Carlos continues to develop his board and continues to play lands, and Joey's still missing land drops. Either Hub getting some lands. Oh, that was a Plains.
All right, so Joey is going to be able to deploy more spells this game. And, missing a couple land drops, it doesn't necessarily mean the game is over, but it's going to be an uphill battle for him. He's going to try to play into all of Carlos's open mana here.
All right, so Joey does attempt to cast this Spell Queller. Or sorry, excuse me, the Selfless Spirit. And it does resolve, but Carlos has a chance here to play a Glimmer of Genius.
And if you look at Carlos's hand, he actually did have that Spell Queller. He chose not to use it, in part because if he casts Glimmer of Genius this turn, he can actually leave up mana for Spell Queller plus negate over the next couple turns and potentially ramp up to 6 mana to play Linvala, the Preserver, which Carlos is going to be ahead on board and ahead on life, but she'll still be a 5/5 flyer.
It does seem like the Selfless Spirit does not do very much on this board so far, so not countering seems very, very reasonable.
Yeah, I like Carlos's play here.
All right, so Spell Queller getting in there for 2. Carlos is going to play a Wandering Fumarole. I'm going to ship the turn back to Joey. Joey, let's see what you can string together. He did not find a land for this turn. He will be able to crack that clue and potentially find another one, but that Immolating Glare is going to be attempting to kill the Selfless Spirit. Rattle Chains is going to give it hexproof, though.
Yeah, this is actually one of the better interactions for Joey, since he gets a 2-for-1 here, because even though Carlos does have the Blessed Alliance as a follow-up, Rattle Chains did counter the Immolating Glare.
This does mean that Joey does not have an opportunity to crack this clue and find another land, though. So he's still with 2 lands, and Carlos is about to make his 6th land drop. We're in Torrential Gearhulk territory, and Joey's deploying 1 threat a turn.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be surprised if Carlos just slammed Linvala, the Preserver. Once he gets this 5/5 flyer out, he can just protect her with Spell Queller and negate. So Joey just needs to hit a land to stasis snare right now.
Land? It's a summary dismissal. That's the opposite of a land at this point.
Oh, that's potentially one of the worst cards that Joey could draw up there, because not only does it cost 4 mana, he's on 2 lands, it's also just like a super reactive card that you want way later in the game. And now that Carlos has double counterspell up between Spellcaller and Negate, it's going to be really hard for Joey to deal with this Linvala.
All right, Fumarole animating, getting in there. All the creatures are attacking.
And I like how aggressively Carlos is playing this. Look, when your opponent's missing land drops, you actually want to end the game as quickly as possible, because if they hit land drops, like Carlos only has 1 card in his hand and Joey has 6, so Carlos has incentive to get this over with. I do think in this case Carlos is going to succeed.
All right, so Fumarole switching power and toughness there. This drops Joey down to 3. One last draw, and it's an Archangel, obviously, in a second copy of it.
Joey's going to look back and think that this was a great weekend. He made top 8 of the Pro Tour, his 5th Pro Tour, his first top 8. But I'm afraid that he's on the brink of elimination here, and I think that Carlos Romao is going to advance. We'll see in just a second.
Joey wants to move to blocks in front of Fumarole.
It's your priority. Passing it. I'll sacrifice it.
So he's sacrificing that Selfless Spirit. Does buy...
You want to switch to power toughness?
That Rattle Chain's an extra turn. He finds a land.
But, you know...
Daggers! It's a tap land, and there's a handshake. Carlos Romao advances to quarterfinals, stage 2. Congratulations to Joey on an amazing run. It is his, as you said, 5th PT appearance and first Pro Tour top 8. So he has an awesome weekend to look back on. It's super rough when you mulligan and you just have, a 1-lander. Hopefully try to find a second one, but sometimes you don't get there.
Yeah, and it's tough. Joey played a great match against Carlos. Carlos is a fantastic player, and Carlos was able to take it down.
So congratulations again to Carlos. He will get to advance, and we'll see if the champion is back. We know that there's a big cheering section for him out there.
Oh, yeah.
Who are actively rooting for him, and people are watching the Pro Tour out there. So we wish him the best of luck in the rest of the top 8.
And Carlos has to feel pretty good here, because Carlos is actually going to be facing off against Matt Nass next round.
Okay.
And Matt Nass is playing Etherworks Marvel, and I remember talking to Matt Nass this morning after the whole team tested yesterday.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm playing the winner of Blue-White Control and Jeskai Control. Both matchups are terrible for me. Matt Nass is not really looking forward to this match, from a matchup perspective. So.
Yeah, we got to catch up with Matt yesterday at dinner, and he was, focused on the food, and let's focus on the PT top 8.
Yeah,
because
let's celebrate the top 8.
Not so much on the matches tomorrow, because it seemed like it was not good. And talking to the rest of the team, it seems like they also don't feel like it's too great of a matchup.
It's not. And Etherworks Marvel is a deck that is just built around resolving, Etherworks Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And Carlos just has a lot of ways to interact with that, especially post-board. So it's going to be an uphill battle. The fact that Summary Dismissal also counters the Hardcast Emrakul plan.
That's so rough.
Yeah, it's just like the backup plan of this Etherworks Marvel deck is just to go land, Emrakul, and Summary Dismissal just takes care of that.
Yeah, it's like you managed to resolve the Emrakul. At least let me get your extra turn, okay? But not even that.
Nope.
In any event, we have a lot more magic waiting for you today. But first, let's send it over to Rich at the news desk.
Thanks very much to Gabby Sparks and Luis Scott Vargas there with the call on stage 1 of our quarterfinals. Luis will be here at the desk in just a moment. Already here is Pro Tour historian Brian David Marshall. And BDM will take a look at the morning we've had so far. It's stage 1 of the quarterfinals. If you're just joining us, welcome along. Now, have a look at that bracket. It is a very different style of bracket, so we should just explain one more time how that works. The 5 through 8 seeds began the morning playing in stage 1 of the quarterfinals, and the 2 winners would advance to stage 2. That's coming up in a few minutes' time, where the number 3 and 4 seed, that's Pierre Dajon of France down there in the bottom half of the bracket, and Matt Nass of the United States in the top half with Team Etherworks, they lie in wait in stage 2. Their reward for being the 3 and 4 seed as a result of the 16 rounds of Swiss on Friday and Saturday is that they didn't have to play in stage 1. Even better than that, though, is if you were 1 or 2 seeds. So that's Makis Matsoukas of Greece with red-white tokens and Shota Yasuoka of Japan with Grixis Control. Those 2 players, BDM, straight through to the semi-finals.
Yeah, to give you an idea of what a big deal that was, you see Matt Nass and Pierre Dajon in the stage 2 here. Both those players played in the last round yesterday. round 16, they competed with each other. Matt Nass and Pierre would normally have shaken hands and both advanced to the top 8, but Matt was basically trying to knock Pierre out, not because he didn't want Pierre to get there. He really wanted to be in that final semifinal stage of this bracket and have only well, yes, but only have 2 wins to win a Pro Tour.
Right, for sure,
So
yes.
It's very different to see that happen at this level. You know, where a lot of times the round 16 can be fairly anticlimactic, but it was really tension filled for
Yeah,
us.
he had a 3-round swing potentially, right the way from semi-final to stage 2 to stage 1 potentially.
Right.
He's ended up in the middle. So let's walk you through what did happen this morning. We had Carlos Romao with Jeskai Control against Joey Manor with White-Blue Flash. BDM, we've just seen that one finish. Who emerged from that one?
Well, that was world champion Carlos Romao playing in his second Pro Tour top 8. Removed, set about
Just
almost
the
a
14 years apart.
decade and a half apart. But yeah, it was Carlos Romao with the Jeskai Control, and I don't think he expected that he was going to advance when he was playtesting the matchup.
No, and neither did we, to be fair. We felt that probably the White-Blue Flash would play out some aggressive threats and that Carlos's Fumigates were going to be a bit slow. We knew he was going to sideboard those out after the first couple of games, but Carlos Romao won pretty handily in that one. We've been joined by Luis Scott Vargas, fresh from the booth. Your sense of the Romao Manor matchup?
I do think that I would have rather been on the Joey Manor side up until the final result. I mean, he did end up losing the match, but traditionally the aggro control decks have fared well against control.
Okay, so then the second quarterfinal in stage 1 saw Ben Hull up against Li Shichan. Ben liked his matchup in terms of the cards, didn't like the matchup in terms of experience and just excellence at the table. Really rates Li Shichan playing in his 5th Pro Tour top 8. But as you'll see, it was Ben Hull with red-white vehicles who advances to stage 2, and he'll be up against Pierre Dajon. Luis, a surprise in that one, 3-1 to Ben Hull?
No, that one was less surprising. I do think that Ben was being modest, and I don't disagree with his assessment that Li Shichan has more experience, but honestly, Ben's deck was very well set up for the matchup.
All right, so let's get into stage 2 of our quarterfinals. And Carlos Romao, by virtue of his 3-1 victory there, means he advances to face Matt Nass. Let's take a look at Carlos Romao for you. And we'll look at this Brazilian player who is the 2002 world champion. There he is, part of Deck's army, 246 lifetime pro points, way past the 250 at this point. His second Pro Tour top 8, 14 years after becoming world champion. 5 Grand Prix titles, 2 of those in the last 6 weeks. GP Sao Paulo as team and then individually at GP Atlanta. What deck is he playing? Let's take a look at his list. It is Jeskai Control. Luis, do you like this deck?
This deck's awesome. I pretty much like any deck that has Torrential Gearhulk in it, and Carlos's deck has played out really well over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, he's super impressive as a player. A lot of people watching this weekend won't really know Carlos because 2002 is a long while ago.
Well, I thought it was pretty interesting. You were talking about how before you were on the Pro Tour, Carlos was someone you watched and read about.
Yeah, he was a well-known great player, world champion, but before I even started playing, and it is very impressive seeing him make a resurgence over these last just couple weeks.
Kind of funny also to see the similarities, in terms of style of deck. Obviously Torrential Gearhulk doesn't quite measure up to Psychotog, but in terms of being a big finisher and having all this kind of card drawing, it's a deck you could easily kind of line up if you had decks and players. You could easily line
Glimmer
that deck
Genius might not be Fact or Fiction, but casting them both feels pretty good.
So Carlos Romao, this is his second outing here on Sunday, but now here's a first time out of the gate. It's Matt Nass of the United States from Team Channel Fireball. He's 24 years old, 165 lifetime pro points, which is a big haul, $36,000 lifetime earnings. This is his first Pro Tour top 8, which came as a bit of a surprise because he's been around forever. He's one of the truly great teammates. He has a fantastic record in Team Grand Prix. He's fantastic to be around. And Luis, you can attest him on a personal level. He's not just a great mind, but he is a fantastically supportive teammate.
Yeah, Matt's a great teammate. He's a great friend of mine. He's actually a coworker. So I see Matt Nass in a lot of different areas, and I think he performs very well in all of them.
Well, let's see what deck he's brought to the table. It is Teamer Etherworks. BDM, this is very much built around one of the breakout cards of the weekend, Etherworks Marvel.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the card when the set was revealed. This was the card you immediately went to, and you're like, could you actually do this? Could you put an Emrakul into play on turn 4? And obviously the answer was yes, but whether you could do that consistently was really the nagging question. And Matt has really, because he's really the primary architect of this deck for the team, right?
He's one of the main driving forces. A lot of people worked on the deck, but this is exactly the kind of deck Matt loves, and he's one of the people who, just tried a lot of different configurations, builds, and innovations within it.
We talked a little bit about it off camera, and it was sort of the comparison came up, like, imagine if Collected Company was a permanent that you could use multiple times in a game. You only get one spell off of it, but you could use it multiple times in a game.
Louise, Matt's bleak version of his matchup here was, well, I either play a Spellqueller deck that has counterspells for my Emrakul, or I play a blue-white Spellqueller deck that has counterspells for my Emrakul. Is it that bleak?
It is definitely not great, especially in a best of 5 where that reduces the variance, having more games. And I think that Matt's going to have a tough matchup ahead of him. I do think that he is accurately assessing his chances here.
All right. Well, good luck to Matt Nass, the underdog against Carlos Romao, we feel. Let's go back to our bracket and show you what else is coming your way in just a few minutes' time, because in the bottom half, it is Ben Hull of Canada who advanced from stage 1, and he faces Pierre Dajon. So let's take a look at the players. Here is Pierre Dajon, his first match of Sunday. He's from the Haruyuya Pros team, Tomohiro Saito's global network, expanding here and causing great success. Already a Pro Tour finalist from Theros in 2013, runner-up behind teammate Jeremy Desani there. 3 Grand Prix top 8s. He is a gold pro. What is his deck? Well, this is another fun one. It is blue-red spells. Luis, talk us through this.
So in the main deck, the way that Pierre is going to win his games is Dynavolt Tower. Dynavolt Tower is an awesome addition from Kaladesh to this deck, where every time he plays a spell, he gets 2 energy, and it lets him spend 5 energy to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. So it operates as both a win condition and a way to keep the board clear against something like red-white vehicles.
At 4 energy, if it was activated, that would feel like, I think a lot of people would have been super excited by the card, because it's like, well, I only have to do it twice. And that weird little 2 into 5, I think, certainly at a casual level, put a lot of people off. It's like, oh, I've got to do it 3 times, really, before I can do anything with it. But a lot of people have found a way to make it awesome.
He needs to get to 35 energy just to sort of enact his base plan of dealing 20 or more damage to his opponent. That's 35 energy. That's a lot. But, as he said, he's put a lot of spells in here to make that happen.
Well, I will say that we saw him multiple times in the feature match area. He never did that in game 1. He just won all his games with a Niblis of Frost post-sports. So we'll see how that ends up in the top
he said
4.
feels like he didn't lose a game where Niblis of Frost hit the battlefield.
I certainly didn't see him lose any.
All right, so that's Pierre Dajon, and his opponent comes out of stage 1. It is Ben Hull of Canada. Here he is, 34 years old, 0 lifetime pro points until this weekend, and that is going to go rattling up. And that $250, that's going to look a lot more. There are going to be some extra zeros on that by the end of the day. This is his first Pro Tour top 8. Of course, it is very much a limited player, sort of almost pulled a deck off the internet at the last minute, BDM, for this one. Let's take a look at his list for you. It's red-white vehicles.
Yeah, this is really one of the, when you're preparing for this tournament, this is one of the decks you played with, you play tested against, and you said, this is something I'm going to have to face. And Ben really kind of said, my play testing regimen was watching CVM videos of this deck, and decided to sort of default to someone with more experience in Standard. It's actually, I think, a great lesson. There are a lot of really good Magic players playing really good decks and talking about them online, and he availed himself of that resource and has made the most of it here.
And Luis, the red-white vehicles was the deck. We said this right back at the start of the weekend when we started talking about Standard. This was the deck that every player in the room knew existed, everyone had in their gauntlet, everyone was ready for. Well, maybe not ready for him.
Yeah, it's the sort of deck that even if you're ready for it and test against it, it's still a very consistent and powerful deck. So I'm not surprised that Ben did well.
All right, well, the first stage is done. It's time for stage 2. Carlos Romao with Jeskai Control against Matt Nass with Team at Etherworks, and Ben Hull with red-white vehicles against Pierre Dajon with blue-red spells. Here comes part 2 of our quarterfinal delight here at Pro Tour Kaladesh.